Welcome. I'm Magnus, and I bring you horror stories to help you relax, or maybe to keep you up at night. Tell us where you're from. Are there spooky forests nearby? If you're a fan of scary stories, subscribe and drop a like. Get cozy, and let's begin. I'm Lucas James Harper. I've got 29 years old, and I live in Boise, Idaho. Life up here's pretty chill. Lots of trees, quiet streets, and that crisp mountain air that makes you feel alive. Me and my buddies, Tara Lynn Carter and Joel David Reese, decided we needed a break from the daily grind. You know? Tara's 27, a firecracker with a laugh that could wake a coma patient, and Joel's 31, the laid-back type who's always got a beer in hand and a sarcastic comeback ready. We've been tight since high school, and every year we do something wild to keep the good times rolling. This time, we settled on a car camping trip. I've got this beat-up old Subaru Outback, perfect for sleeping in the back with the seats down. Tara's got her Jeep Cherokee, and Joel's rocking his rusty Ford Escape. The plan was simple: pile in, drive somewhere remote, and just soak in the freedom. We picked Reno, Nevada, cause it's got that gritty desert vibe, plus it's only a few hours south of Boise. I'd never been, but Tara swore the outskirts had some killer spots to crash. So, picture this. It's late September, the leaves are just starting to turn, and we're hyped. I'm behind the wheel, blasting some old-school Nirvana, leading the pack. Tara's in her Jeep behind me, munching on gas station jerky. I can see her in my rear view, bobbing her head to the beat. Joel's bringing up the rear in his Ford, probably sneaking sips from a flask. He's predictable like that. We roll out of Boise around noon, laughing about dumb stuff from back in the day, like that time Joel got stuck in a porta potty at a fair. The drive's smooth, and I'm feeling good, man. We hit Reno by dusk, and let me tell ya, it's got this weird energy, like it's alive but kinda dead at the same time. Casinos glowing in the distance, but we ain't here for that. We head west, out past the city limits, aiming for the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest. Tara found this spot online, some old dirt road off Highway 80, supposed to be quiet and tucked away. I'm thinking, sweet, just us and the stars, right? The road's bumpy as hell. My Subaru's rattling like it's gonna fall apart, but we make it to this clearing surrounded by scraggly pines and sagebrush. It's flat enough to park, and the air's got that dry, dusty smell. We pull up, kill the engines, and stretch our legs. Joel's already cracking jokes about how he's gonna sleep like a king in his luxury suite, his janky Ford with a sleeping bag tossed in the back. Tara's grinning, setting up a little camp chair she brewed. Hey, so I'm Lucas James Harper. I've got 29 years old, and I live in Boise, Idaho. Life up here's pretty chill. Lots of trees, quiet streets, and that crisp mountain air that makes you feel alive. Me and my buddies, Tara Lynn Carter and Joel David Reese, decided we needed a break from the daily grind. You know? Tara's 27, a firecracker with a laugh that could wake a coma patient, and Joel's 31, the laid-back type who's always got a beer in hand and a sarcastic comeback ready. We've been tight since high school, and every year we do something wild to keep the good times rolling. This time, we settled on a car camping trip. I've got this beat-up old Subaru Outback, perfect for sleeping in the back with the seats down. Tara's got her Jeep Cherokee, and Joel's rocking his rusty Ford Escape. The plan was simple: pile in, drive somewhere remote, and just soak in the freedom. We picked Reno, Nevada, cause it's got that gritty desert vibe, plus it's only a few hours south of Boise. I'd never been, but Tara swore the outskirts had some killer spots to crash. So, picture this. It's late September, the leaves are just starting to turn, and we're hyped. I'm behind the wheel, blasting some old-school Nirvana, while Tara's shotgun, munching on gas station jerky. Joel's following in his Ford, probably sneaking sips from a flask. He's predictable like that. We roll out of Boise around noon, laughing about dumb stuff from back in the day, like that time Joel got stuck in a porta potty at a fair. The drive's smooth, and I'm feeling good, man. We hit Reno by dusk, and let me tell ya, it's got this weird energy, like it's alive but kinda dead at the same time. Casinos glowing in the distance, but we ain't here for that. We head west, out past the city limits, aiming for the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest. Tara found this spot online, some old dirt road off Highway 80, supposed to be quiet and tucked away. I'm thinking, sweet, just us and the stars, right? The road's bumpy as hell. My Subaru's rattling like it's gonna fall apart, but we make it to this clearing surrounded by scraggly pines and sagebrush. It's flat enough to park, and the air's got that dry, dusty smell. We pull up, kill the engines, and stretch our legs. Joel's already cracking jokes about how he's gonna sleep like a king in his luxury suite, his janky Ford with a sleeping bag tossed in the back. Tara's grinning, setting up a little camp chair she brought along. Sun's dipping low, painting the sky this crazy orange, and I'm just taking it all in. We're out here, middle of nowhere, no cell service, no worries. I pop the hatch on my Subaru, toss in a couple blankets, and figure it's gonna be cozy. Tara's fiddling with her Jeep, making sure it's locked up tight. She's paranoid about critters. Joel's over there kicking rocks, acting like he owns the place. We get a little fire going with some sticks we scrounge up, not too big, just enough to roast some marshmallows Tara packed. The flames are crackling, and we're swapping stories, passing around a bag of chips. I'm feeling pretty damn content, you know? Like this is what life's about. Good friends, open sky, and no bullshit. The night's settling in, stars popping out one by one, and it's quiet, real quiet. Tara's the first to yawn, saying she's beat from the drive. She climbs into her Jeep, rolls the windows up tight, and calls it a night. Joel's still sipping something, sprawled out in his Ford, door half open like he don't care. I crawl into my Subaru, wiggle into my sleeping bag, and crack the back window just a bit for some air. It's pitch black out there now, and I'm drifting off, thinking this trip's gonna be one for the books. But yeah, that's when I notice it. Real faint at first, like my brain's playing tricks. Something's off, just a little nudge in my gut telling me to pay attention. I shake it off, chalk it up to being tired, and close my eyes. Man, if I'd known what was coming, I'd have peeled out of there faster than you can say bad idea.ht along. Sun's dipping low, painting the sky this crazy orange, and I'm just taking it all in. We're out here, middle of nowhere, no cell service, no worries. I pop the hatch on my Subaru, toss in a couple blankets, and figure it's gonna be cozy. Tara's fiddling with her Jeep, making sure it's locked up tight. She's paranoid about critters. Joel's over there kicking rocks, acting like he owns the place. We get a little fire going with some sticks we scrounge up, not too big, just enough to roast some marshmallows Tara packed. The flames are crackling, and we're swapping stories, passing around a bag of chips. I'm feeling pretty damn content, you know? Like this is what life's about. Good friends, open sky, and no bullshit. The night's settling in, stars popping out one by one, and it's quiet, real quiet. Tara's the first to yawn, saying she's beat from the drive. She climbs into her Jeep, rolls the windows up tight, and calls it a night. Joel's still sipping something, sprawled out in his Ford, door half open like he don't care. I crawl into my Subaru, wiggle into my sleeping bag, and crack the back window just a bit for some air. It's pitch black out there now, and I'm drifting off, thinking this trip's gonna be one for the books. But yeah, that's when I notice it. Real faint at first, like my brain's playing tricks. Something's off, just a little nudge in my gut telling me to pay attention. I shake it off, chalk it up to being tired, and close my eyes. Man, if I'd known what was coming, I'd have peeled out of there faster than you can say bad idea. Sleeping bag's all cozy, and I'm half dreaming about burgers or something dumb like that. Then, bam, I wake up to this faint tapping sound. It's not loud, just this annoying little tap tap tap, like a twig brushing the car. I figure it's the wind or some critter messing around. So I roll over, yank the blanket tighter, and try to crash again. But it keeps going, irregular-like, and now I'm wide awake, staring at the ceiling of my car like an idiot. I sit up, rub my eyes, and peek out the back window. Nothing but black out there. The fire's died down to embers, and the trees are just these dark blobs. The tapping stops, thank God, but now I'm all jittery. I check my phone. 2:17 a.m., no bars, big surprise. I mutter to myself, Lucas, you're losing it, man, and flop back down. That's when I hear Tara's voice, real low, coming from her Jeep parked maybe 20 feet away. Joel, you hear that? She's whispering, and I can tell she's spooked. I crawl to the side window, squinting through the dark, and see her silhouette sitting up in her driver's seat. Joel's Ford is quiet, door still cracked open like he left it. I tap my window lightly, just enough to get her attention, and she whips her head around. Lucas, she hisses, like she's afraid to wake something up. Yeah, what's up? I whisper back, keeping it low. She's all tense, says she heard something moving out there. Not like an animal, more deliberate, she thinks. I'm like, come on, Tara, It's probably just a deer or whatever. But she's not buying it. She's got that look, the one she gets when she's dead serious. She says it stopped a minute ago, but it was close, too close. I'm starting to feel that creepy crawly vibe now, you know? Like when you're a kid and you swear something's under the bed. I grab my flashlight, flick it on, and shine it out the window. The beam cuts through the dark, lighting up the clearing. Empty, just our cars and some scrappy bushes. Tara's watching me, and I give her a thumbs up, trying to play it cool. All clear, drama queen. I call out, smirking a little. Then Joel finally stirs, groaning like a bear coming out of hibernation. "What the hell you two yapping about?" he mumbles, sticking his head out his Ford. His hair's all messed up, and he's squinting at us like we're nuts. Tara fills him in, and he just laughs it off. Classic Joel. "You're hearing ghosts, Tara. Lay off the scary movies." But I catch him glancing around, like maybe he's not that sure. We decide to chill for a bit, figure it's nothing. I climb out of my car, stretch my legs, and Tara joins me by the fire pit. Joel stumbles over too, dragging his sleeping bag like a cape. Dude's a mess. We poke at the embers, get a little flame going again, and I'm thinking maybe some heat'll calm us down. The air's cold now, that desert chill that sneaks up on ya, and I'm wishing I'd packed an extra hoodie. We're sitting there, quiet, when it happens again, not tapping this time, but a smell. It's faint at first, like damp rot or something sour, drifting in on the breeze. I wrinkle my nose, and Tara catches it too. She's like, "You smell that?" Joel sniffs the air, shrugs, says it's probably a dead animal nearby. But it's weird, man, 'cause it's not steady. It comes and goes, like whatever's making it is moving around us. I'm trying to keep it light, cracking a joke about how we're gonna wake up covered in skunk juice or something, but my gut's twisting. Tara's fidgeting, Joel's pretending he don't care, and I'm scanning the trees, that flashlight gripped tight. The night's too still now, no crickets, no wind, just this heavy quiet that's starting to feel all wrong. I'm telling myself it's fine, we're fine, but deep down, I'm wondering if we should have just stayed home. The flames are flickering low, barely keeping that creepy chill off us. I'm clutching my flashlight like it's a lifeline, and Tara's got her arms crossed tight, staring into the dark like she's waiting for something to jump out. Joel's still playing it cool, kicking dirt into the embers, but even he's quieter now. No smart-ass remarks, just sipping his flask and glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. That smell's back, stronger this time, like wet garbage mixed with something metallic. I gag a little, cover my nose with my sleeve, and mutter, "Man, that's nasty." Tara's nodding, her eyes wide, and she whispers, "It's closer, Lucas." I swear it's closer. Joel snorts, but it's forced. He's not fooling anybody. I sweep the flashlight around again, beam bouncing off the cars and the scruffy pines, but there's nothing. Just that smell, hanging thick in the air. Then, holy crap, something moves. Not subtle, either. It's this quick, jerky shuffle off to our left, maybe 30 yards out, where the trees get denser. I whip the light over there, and for a split second, I catch it. A shape, tall and lanky, ducking behind a trunk. My heart's pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. "You see that?" I hiss, and Tara's already on her feet, grabbing my arm. Joel's up too, squinting, saying, "What the hell was that?" I keep the light trained on that spot, but whatever it was, it's gone, or hiding. Tara's breathing fast, like she's about to bolt, and I'm trying to keep it together, saying, "Maybe it's just some dude messing with us, you know? Like a prank." But even I don't believe that. This ain't the vibe of some drunk college kid. The air feels heavy now, like it's pressing down on us, and that smells so bad I can taste it. We're standing there, frozen, when we hear it. A low, raspy wheeze, like someone's trying to breathe through a busted lung. It's coming from the right this time, behind Joel's fort. I swing the flashlight over, and there's nothing, but the sound keeps going, slow and deliberate. Tara's whispering, "Lucas, we gotta go, this is messed up," and I'm nodding, 'cause yeah, this is way past weird. It's straight up scary. Joel finally drops the tough guy act, muttering, "All right, this is freaky. Let's pack up." But before we can even move, something slams into my Subaru, hard. The whole car rocks, metal groaning, and I yell, spinning around. There's a dent in the hatch, big and ugly, like someone chucked a boulder at it. My flashlight's shaking in my hand as I scan the clearing, but there's no one, nothing. Just that wheezy breathing circling us now, louder, closer. Tara's freaking out, digging her nails into my arm, and Joel's got his pocket knife out, holding it like he's ready to stab the dark. I'm yelling, "Who's there? Show yourself, asshole," trying to sound brave, but my voice cracks. Then we see it. Oh man, we see it. Across the clearing, maybe 50 feet away, this figure steps out from the trees. Tall, too tall, all hunched and twisted, with arms that dangle way past its knees. The flashlight catches its face, or where a face should be, and it's just this blank, pale mess. No eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched tight. I'm locked up, legs like jelly, staring at this thing that's so wrong it's making my brain scream. Tara's whimpering, Joel's cursing under his breath, and the thing just stands there, swaying a little, that we's rattling out of it. Then it moves, fast, jerky, like a puppet with cut strings, and it's coming right at us. The smell hits like a wave, rotting and sharp, and I realize we're not just in some horror movie scenario. This is real, and it's bad. We stumble back, tripping over each other, and I'm shouting, "Get to the cars now." But my Subaru's trashed, hatch all bent, and Tara's Jeep is locked. She's fumbling with her keys, hands shaking so bad she drops them. Joel's bolting for his Ford, yelling at us to hurry, and that thing's closing in. It's weird, lurching steps eating up the ground. I don't know what it is, man, but it's disturbing as hell, and it's not stopping. That thing, whatever it is lurching toward us, all jerky and wrong, and I'm yelling at Tara to grab her damn keys. She's on her knees, pawing at the dirt, tears streaking her face, and I'm thinking, we're toast. Man, we're totally toast. The flashlight's bouncing in my hand, light jittering across that blank, faceless head, and it's close now. Too close, maybe 20 feet away, that wheezy rasp cutting through the air. Joel's already at his Ford, slamming the door shut and cranking the engine. It sputters. Classic Joel, never fixes his junk, and I'm screaming, "Go, go, go." Tara finally snags her keys, hands shaking like crazy, and I shove her toward her Jeep. "Unlock it, come on." I'm half dragging her, my heart's hammering, and that smell's choking me. Rotten, metallic, like death's breathing down our necks. I glance back, and oh man, it's picking up speed, those long, freaky arms swinging like they're gonna snatch us up. I don't even think. I just bolt for my Subaru, figuring I'll take my chances with the busted hatch. The driver's door's still good, so I dive in, slam it shut, and lock it. My hands are sweaty, fumbling with the keys, and I'm praying the engine turns over. It does, thank God, and I'm flooring it, tires spinning in the dirt. Tara's Jeep roars to life next to me, headlights slicing through the dark, and Joel's Ford finally catches, coughing out this cloud of exhaust. We're peeling out, kicking up dust, but that thing's not giving up. It's running now, full-on sprinting, and it's fast, way faster than it should be. I catch it in my rear view, a blurry nightmare gaining on us, and I'm yelling into the empty car. What the hell is that? The road's a mess, ruts and rocks bouncing us around, and I'm white-knuckling the wheel, trying to keep it together. Tara's ahead, weaving like she's drunk, and Joel's right behind me, his headlights glaring in my mirror. I'm thinking, just get to the highway, man, just get out of here. But the forest feels endless, tree is sidereal, those pines closing in tight around us like a trap. Then, bam, something smashes into my passenger window, glass cracking in a spiderweb. I flinch, swearing loud, and see it's that thing again, slamming those freaky arms against Tara's Jeep too. She swerves, nearly clips a tree, and I'm flooring it harder, adrenaline pumping so hard I can barely breathe. The thing's keeping pace, darting between trees, and I realize it's not just chasing. It's hurting us, cutting off angles like it knows the terrain. We hit a fork in the road, and I'm yelling out of my cracked window, "Left, go left." Tara veers sharp, tires screeching, and Joel follows, but the thing leaps, freaking leaps, landing in front of my Subaru. I slam the brakes, skid to a stop, and it's right there, looming over the hood, that blank face tilting like it's sizing me up. My stomach drops. This is it, life or death, and I'm not ready to die in Reno. I throw it in reverse, gun it backward, then crank the wheel and swing around it. Tara's ahead, Joel's on my tail, and we're booking it, that horror still lunging after us. The highway's gotta be close. I can see lights flickering through the trees, and I'm praying we make it. 'Cause this is one scary mess I ain't ever signing up for again. My Subaru's rattling like it's gonna shake apart, the cracked window letting in this cold, dusty wind that stings my face. Tara's Jeep is up ahead, swerving a little but holding steady, and Joel's Ford is glued to my tail, headlights bouncing in my mirror. That thing, whatever it is still out there. I can feel it, like a weight pressing on my chest. The highway lights are closer now, flickering through the trees, and I'm thinking, just a little more. Man, we're almost out of this nightmare. I'm gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles are white, yelling at myself in my head to stay sharp. The road's narrowing, branches scraping the sides of my car, and I catch a glimpse of Tara's brake lights flashing. She's slowing down. What the hell, Tara, keep going. I shout, even though she can't hear me. Joel honks behind me, short and sharp, like he's pissed or scared or both. I lean forward, squinting, and see it, a fallen tree, big and gnarly, blocking the path. Tara's already out of her Jeep, waving her arms at us, her face all pale and frantic in my headlights. I slam on the brakes, skid to a stop, and Joel pulls up beside me, rolling his window down. We're screwed, man, he yells, voice cracking. Tara is shouting too. It's too heavy, we can't move it. I jump out, heart pounding, and run over. Sure enough, this tree's a monster, trunk thick as my torso, roots ripped up like something yanked it down on purpose. I'm kicking at it, swearing loud, when that wheezy rasp cuts through the air again. Close, way too close. Tara freezes, Joel spins around, and I grab my flashlight from the car, shining it back the way we came. There it is, that tall, twisted freak, lurching out of the trees maybe 40 yards back, its blank face glinting in the beam. Go now, I scream, but there's nowhere to go. The tree's got us pinned. Tara's crying, saying we should run on foot, but Joel's shaking his head. No way. It's too fast. I'm thinking fast, or trying to, grabbing a tire iron from my Subaru. We fight or we die, I say, sounding braver than I feel. Joel pulls his pocket knife. Tara's got nothing but a wild look in her eyes, and we're backing up against the cars, that thing closing in with those jerky, spider-like steps. It hits us like a freight train, literally. 1 second it's 20 feet away, the next it's on us, swinging those freaky arms. I duck, swing the tire iron, and connect with something solid. It screeches, this high, awful sound that makes my ears ring. Joel's slashing with his knife, yelling, and Tara's kicking at it, but it's too strong. It grabs Joel, lifts him like he's nothing, and, oh man, I hear this sickening crunch. He goes limp, blood dripping down, and it tosses him aside like trash. I'm screaming his name, swinging again, but it's got me now, grabs my arm and twists. Pain explodes, white hot, and I drop the tire iron. Tara's pulling at me, shrieking, "Lucas, run!" She yanks me free, and we stumble toward her Jeep, my arm hanging useless. The thing's on Joel now, tearing into him. I can't look, but I hear it, wet and horrible, and I know he's gone. Tara's shoving me into the passenger seat, jumping in, and flooring it, straight at the tree. She rams it, full speed, and the Jeep jolts, tires spinning, but the tree shifts, just enough. We scrape past, metal grinding, and she's sobbing, I'm sorry, over and over. I'm clutching my arm, blood soaking my sleeve, staring out the cracked windshield as the highway lights get brighter. That thing's back there, hunched over Joel, and I'm choking on the realization. He's dead because we stopped, because we didn't keep moving. We hit pavement, tires squealing, and Tara's driving like a maniac, tears streaming. I'm fading, shock setting in, and all I can think is how this was supposed to be a fun trip, just us and the open road. Now Joel's gone, my arm's busted, and that horror's burned into my brain. A tragedy I'll never shake, all 'cause we thought we could outrun something we didn't understand. My name is Daniel Scott Winters, and I'm 32 years old. I live in Sacramento, where I work as an environmental engineer for a consulting firm. Life has been pretty routine lately. Wake up, work, go home, repeat. That's why when my college buddy Marcus suggested we take a weekend car camping trip to Reno, I jumped at the opportunity. Marcus had been my roommate back at UC Davis, and though we drifted apart over the years, we still kept in touch through occasional texts and social media. He'd recently gone through a messy divorce and needed to clear his head. We planned to meet at a remote spot in the mountains just outside Reno, a place Marcus had discovered during one of his solo trips. "It's perfect, Dan," he'd said over the phone, his voice animated for the first time in months. "No campsites, no tourists, just us and the wilderness." I was hesitant at first. I preferred established campgrounds with facilities, but Marcus was insistent. "Trust me, it'll be like old times." Old times, before mortgages and failed marriages and 9-to-5 jobs that sucked the life out of you. So I packed my Honda CR-V with camping supplies, a cooler full of beer and sandwich stuff, sleeping bags, lanterns, and my trusty Swiss Army knife that had been a gift from my father. The drive from Sacramento to Reno was about 2 hours, and I enjoyed watching the landscape change from urban sprawl to the rugged beauty of the Sierra Nevada. The radio played classic rock, and I sang along, feeling the weight of responsibility lifting from my shoulders with each mile marker. Marcus had sent me coordinates for our meeting spot, a small turnout off a Forest Service road. As I navigated the increasingly narrow and rough road, my GPS signal started to weaken. The trees grew thicker, casting long shadows across the path. It was late afternoon by the time I reached the designated area, a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. Marcus's blue Jeep was already there, and he was unloading equipment when I pulled up. "Dan the man," he called out, grinning widely as I stepped out of my car. Marcus looked different, thinner, with a scraggly beard that hadn't been there the last time I'd seen him. But his eyes lit up with the same mischievous glint I remembered from college. We hugged, clapping each other on the back, the awkwardness of time spent apart melting away. "You made it." I was starting to worry you'd chickened out. We spent the next hour setting up our cars for sleeping, removing the back seats, arranging sleeping bags, and padding to create makeshift beds. Marcus had brought a portable camping stove, and we heated up some chili as the sun began to set. The temperature dropped quickly, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. "So, this spot," I said between spoonfuls. "How'd you find it?" Marcus's face changed almost imperceptibly. "Just exploring," he said after a pause. "Got tired of the designated campgrounds. Too many people, too many rules." He took a long swig from his beer. "Besides, this place has character. You'll see." There was something in his tone that made me uneasy, but I brushed it off. Marcus had always been one for dramatics. As darkness fell completely, the forest around us seemed to come alive with sounds. The rustle of leaves, the occasional snap of a twig, the distant howl that might have been wind or might have been something else entirely. We built a small fire in a ring of stones, and Marcus pulled out a bottle of whiskey. "To adventures," he toasted, passing me the bottle. The liquor burned my throat, spreading warmth through my chest. We shared stories under the vast canopy of stars, catching up on the years between us. But as the night wore on, I noticed Marcus growing increasingly distracted, his gaze darting to the darkness beyond our fire's glow. "Everything okay?" I asked after he fell silent mid-sentence for the third time. He startled, as if he'd forgotten I was there. "Yeah, just thought I heard something," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Probably just deer." He poured more whiskey into our cups. "Did I ever tell you about the legends around these parts?" Before I could answer, he launched into a story about disappearances in these woods dating back to the gold rush era. Miners who went missing, hikers who were never found. "They say there's something in these mountains that doesn't want us here," he concluded, his voice dropping to a whisper. I laughed nervously, blaming the chill that ran down my spine on the night air rather than his words. I woke the next morning to the sound of Marcus rummaging through his Jeep. Sunlight filtered through the trees, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. My head throbbed slightly from the whiskey, and my mouth felt dry. I checked my phone. No service, as expected. "Morning," I called out, stretching as I climbed out of my CR-V. Marcus looked up, his expression oddly tense before relaxing into a smile. "Sleep well?" he asked, although he didn't wait for an answer. "I thought we could hike up to Eagle Ridge today. There's an amazing view of the valley." He pointed to a trail barely visible between the trees. I squinted, trying to gauge the difficulty of the hike. My outdoor experience was limited to well-maintained trails and car camping in designated areas. This looked more primitive. After a breakfast of instant coffee and granola bars, we set off. Marcus led the way, moving with surprising agility through the underbrush. The trail, if you could call it that, was steep and rocky, with fallen trees blocking the path in several places. An hour into the hike, I was breathing heavily, sweat soaking my t-shirt despite the cool mountain air. How much further? I gasped, pausing to take a drink from my water bottle. Marcus had stopped ahead of me, his body unnaturally still. "Marcus," I called, a note of concern in my voice. He turned slowly, and for a moment, I didn't recognize the look in his eyes. Wild, almost feral. Then he blinked, and it was gone. "Not far," he said, "but maybe we should turn back. Weather's changing." I looked up at the sky, surprised to see dark clouds gathering where minutes before there had been only blue. The wind had picked up too, carrying a strange, metallic scent. As we made our way back down the trail, I noticed something odd. Weren't these trees marked before? I asked, pointing to a cluster of pines. I could have sworn they'd had bright orange surveyors tape tied around them when we passed earlier. Marcus didn't answer, just quickened his pace. The forest seemed different on the return journey. Denser, the shadows deeper, the sounds muffled as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. We were about halfway back to our campsite when I first noticed the carvings. At first, I thought they were just unusual patterns in the bark, until I saw another tree with the same markings and another. Crude symbols etched deep into the wood, some fresh enough that sap still oozed from the cuts. "What are these?" I asked, running my fingers over the strange sigils. Marcus grabbed my wrist, pulling my hand away with surprising force. "Don't touch them," he said sharply. Then, more calmly, "Sorry. It's just, there's been some weird stuff happening in these woods. Probably just kids or hikers leaving their mark, but..." He trailed off, his eyes darting between the trees as if searching for something, or someone. I remembered his stories from the night before and felt a prickle of unease. The air had grown colder, and the sky darker, though it was barely past noon. When we finally reached our clearing, I felt a surge of relief at the sight of our vehicles. But Marcus froze at the edge of the trees, his hand shooting out to stop me. "Dan," he whispered, "did you leave your car door open?" I looked at my CRV. The driver's side door was indeed ajar, though I was certain I'd locked it before we left. More disturbing were the muddy handprints that smeared the windows and the side panels. Cautiously, we approached the vehicles. My car had been ransacked, sleeping bag unrolled, cooler contents strewn about, backpack emptied. But nothing seemed to be missing. My wallet and keys were still where I'd left them. Marcus's Jeep, strangely, was untouched. "Bears," I suggested weakly, though I knew bears wouldn't leave handprints or open a car door without leaving claw marks. Marcus shook his head, his face pale. "We should leave," I said, already gathering my scattered belongings. "Head back to Reno, find a hotel." The idea of spending another night in these woods suddenly seemed not just unappealing, but dangerous. Marcus hesitated, looking torn. "We can't," he finally said. "Not yet." There was something in his voice, fear, resignation. "I need to show you something first. Something important." The wind gusted around us, carrying what sounded like whispers. Or maybe it was just my imagination, fueled by adrenaline and growing dread. We spent the rest of the afternoon rebuilding our campsite, though neither of us mentioned staying the night. I kept looking over my shoulder, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The forest had grown eerily quiet. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. Even the wind had died down, leaving a heavy stillness that pressed against my eardrums like I was deep underwater. Marcus seemed to be listening for something, his head cocked slightly, his eyes constantly scanning the trees. "What did you want to show me?" I asked finally, my patience wearing thin with tension. As dusk approached, Marcus finally revealed his intentions. "Follow me," he said, grabbing a flashlight in his backpack. "And stay close." I hesitated, looking back at our cars, my instincts screaming that we should leave while we still could. But curiosity and concern for my friend won out. Marcus had been acting strange all day, and I needed to understand why. He led me deeper into the forest, away from the trail we'd taken earlier. The trees grew closer together here, their branches forming a canopy so dense that twilight became midnight underneath. Our flashlight beams carved weak tunnels through the darkness. The ground was soft underfoot, almost spongy, covered in a thick carpet of pine needles and moss that muffled our footsteps. The air felt heavy in my lungs, carrying a sweet, rotting smell that made my stomach turn. 3 years ago, Marcus began suddenly, his voice low. I came here with Lisa, before things went bad between us. We found something we shouldn't have. He stopped walking, turning to face me. In the harsh light of the flashlight, his features looked gaunt, haunted. I've been coming back ever since, trying to understand, trying to make it right. Before I could ask what he meant, we emerged into a small clearing. At its center stood what looked like an old mining entrance, a dark mouth in the hillside, partially collapsed, with rotting timber supports barely visible in the gloom. But it was what surrounded the entrance that made my blood run cold. Dozens of small cairns, stones stacked in precarious towers, arranged in concentric circles. And tied to each cairn were items that glinted dully in our flashlight beams. Watches, jewelry, car keys, cell phones. People have been disappearing in these woods for decades, Marcus said, his voice hollow. Not just the old stories I told you. Recent disappearances. Hikers, campers, locals. He moved toward the mine entrance, and I followed reluctantly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Lisa and I, we were exploring, found this place by accident. There was a man here. At least, we thought it was a man. As we drew closer to the mine shaft, I noticed crude symbols carved into the stone around the entrance. The same symbols we'd seen on the trees. Some were ancient, worn by time and weather. Others looked freshly carved, the rock dust still visible on the ground below. Marcus, what is this place? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer directly. The man was doing something to the walls, carving. When he saw us, he just smiled. Lisa wanted to report it, thought he might be connected to the missing persons cases. But I convinced her to leave it alone. We were trespassing, after all, and who'd believe us? His voice cracked. 3 days later, she started having nightmares. Sleepwalking. Carving those symbols into our bedroom walls with kitchen knives. After a week, she wouldn't speak except to say, "It's calling me back." A sound from deep within the mine shaft interrupted his story, a scraping, dragging noise that echoed in the darkness. We both froze. "It's here," Marcus whispered, his face contorted with terror, and was that relief? He grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "I'm sorry, Dan. I couldn't come alone again. It wouldn't let me. It wanted someone new." Before I could process his words, a figure emerged from the mine entrance. Or not so much emerged as unfolded from the shadows. At first, my mind couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. It had the general shape of a human, but moved all wrong, joints bending in impossible directions. Its skin, if you could call it that, seemed to absorb the light from our flashlights rather than reflect it. And where its face should have been was only a blank expanse of darkness, interrupted by a line that slowly split open to reveal teeth. Too many teeth, arranged in concentric circles like the cairns surrounding us. Marcus fell to his knees, dropping his flashlight. "I brought him," he sobbed. "I did what you asked. Now let Lisa go." The thing tilted what passed for its head, regarding Marcus with an interest that felt palpable even without eyes to convey it. Then it turned its attention to me, and I felt something cold and alien brush against my mind, like fingers rifling through my thoughts, my memories, my fears. I ran, blind with terror. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. Behind me, I heard Marcus scream, a sound of such pure agony that it would haunt my nightmares for years to come. I didn't look back, couldn't look back. My only thought was to reach the cars, to escape this nightmare. The forest seemed to work against me, paths that should have led back to our campsite instead looping around or ending abruptly at rock faces I didn't remember. My lungs burned, and my legs trembled with exhaustion, but I kept running. The sounds of pursuit were subtle, not crashing footsteps but a quiet slithering, a soft clicking that seemed to come from all directions at once. When I finally broke through the trees into our clearing, I nearly wept with relief. My car stood where I'd left it, a sanctuary of normality in this surreal horror. I fumbled for my keys, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip them. The clicking sound grew louder, closer. As I yanked open the driver's door, I made the mistake of looking back. It stood at the edge of the clearing, silhouetted against the trees. But it wasn't alone. Marcus was there too, or what was left of him. His body hung suspended a few feet off the ground, limbs dangling like a puppet's. As I watched in frozen horror, his head rotated slowly toward me, too slowly, too far, until it had turned a complete 180 degrees. His eyes were gone, replaced by the same darkness that comprised the creature beside him. His mouth opened, wider than any human mouth should be able to, and from it came not his voice but a chorus of whispers, speaking words in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood. "You're next." I slammed the car door shut and jammed the key into the ignition, my fingers slippery with sweat. The engine roared to life, and I threw the CRV into reverse, tires spinning on the soft forest floor before finding purchase. Through the windshield, I watched in horror as the thing that had been Marcus began to move towards me, not walking but gliding, its feet hovering inches above the ground, arms outstretched like a grotesque parody of an embrace. The rear of my car hit something solid, a tree trunk, and the impact jolted me forward. Shifting to drive, I stomped on the accelerator. The CRV lurched forward, headlights illuminating the clearing and the abomination that now stood directly in my path. For a split second, I hesitated, foot hovering over the brake. This thing wore my friend's face, distorted as it was. But as it opened its mouth again, revealing row upon row of needle-like teeth where Marcus's normal human ones should have been, I made my decision. I floored it. There was a sickening thud as my car struck the thing, and a sound like breaking glass, though none of my windows had shattered. The creature's body rolled up onto the hood, its face pressed against the windshield. For one terrifying moment, our eyes met, or rather, my eyes met the bottomless voids where its eyes should have been. Then it was gone, tumbling off to the side as I swerved onto the Forest Service road. The road was even rougher than I remembered, full of potholes and exposed roots that threatened to snap my axle. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the absolute darkness, and I drove with reckless speed, more afraid of what might be behind me than what lay ahead. The trees seemed to lean inward, branches reaching for my vehicle like grasping hands. Several times, I had to swerve to avoid trunks that appeared to have fallen or been placed across the road since our arrival. My rearview mirror revealed only darkness, but I couldn't shake the certainty that I was being pursued. The radio turned itself on, cycling rapidly through stations, static, fragments of songs, bursts of voices speaking languages I didn't recognize. The temperature inside the car plummeted until I could see my breath fogging the air. And worst of all were the whispers that somehow penetrated the sealed cabin, slithering into my ears. "Come back. Join us. Become." I was maybe halfway back to the main road when my headlights illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the path, a woman with long dark hair obscuring her face, wearing what looked like a white nightgown. I swerved hard to avoid her, the CRV fishtailing dangerously close to the edge of a steep drop. When I looked back, she was gone. Not real. I gasped to myself, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Not real, not real, not real. But the whispers changed, took on a feminine voice. "Daniel, help me. It has me." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Impossible, given the lack of service in these mountains. With one hand still on the wheel, I pulled it out. The screen showed a text message from Marcus's number. "Turn around. Wrong way." As I stared at it in disbelief, another appeared. "You're going deeper." Then another. "IT wants you to get lost." The messages kept coming, faster than anyone could type, filling my screen. "ITS playing with you. Changing the roads. Feeding on your fear. Turn back. No, wait. Don't turn back. I am not Marcus. I am not. I am not. I am." I threw the phone onto the passenger seat, focusing all my attention on the road ahead. The Forest Service path should have connected with the main highway within a few miles, but I'd been driving for what felt like hours. The road had narrowed, the pavement giving way to gravel, then to bare dirt. Trees crowded closer on either side, their branches scraping against the roof and windows of my car. Worst of all, I was running low on gas, the needle hovering just above empty, though the tank had been nearly full when Marcus and I arrived. A fork in the road appeared suddenly in my headlights. Neither path looked familiar, neither looked like it led to civilization. I slowed, uncertain. In that moment of hesitation, something heavy landed on the roof of my car with a thud that dented the metal inward. Claws or fingers began to scrape at the roof, searching for a way in. I screamed and accelerated down the right fork, driving blindly now, swerving from side to side in an attempt to dislodge my unwanted passenger. The scratching stopped as suddenly as it had begun. I allowed myself a moment of hope, until I noticed the long, thin appendage snaking its way through the partially open window on the passenger side. It wasn't an arm or a tentacle, but something in between, covered in what looked like glossy black bark rather than skin. At its end were not fingers, but sharp, curved hooks that clicked against each other as they groped for the window control. In a panic, I grabbed the only weapon within reach, a metal travel mug from the cup holder, and slammed it down on the appendage. There was a sound like breaking branches, and a thick, dark fluid spurted from the wound, hissing where it touched the upholstery. The thing withdrew with a shriek that threatened to burst my eardrums. I rolled up the window and engaged the child locks, for whatever good that might do. The road ended abruptly at a wall of trees. I slammed on the brakes, the CRV skidding to a stop mere inches from the trunks. This couldn't be right. We hadn't come this way. I hadn't passed any other turnoffs. It was as if the forest itself had rearranged while I was driving, trapping me in its depths. I put the car in reverse, preparing to backtrack, when my headlights flickered and died, plunging me into absolute darkness. In the silence that followed, I became aware of movement outside the car, not just in one place, but all around me. Soft footsteps circling, the gentle scrape of claws or branches against metal. Whispers, growing louder, more numerous, speaking not just in my ears now, but directly into my mind. Join us, Daniel. Become one with the forest. With us. Like Marcus. Like Lisa. Like all who find their way here. I sat frozen in my dead car, surrounded by darkness and hostile entities I couldn't see but could sense moving closer. My gas gauge now read empty. The engine had stalled, and even the emergency lights wouldn't come on when I tried them. I was truly trapped. No way to drive out, no way to call for help, and no clear path to escape on foot through miles of unfamiliar forest in the pitch black. As if reading my thoughts, the whispers intensified. No escape, no way out. The forest claims all who enter its heart. A tapping started on my driver's side window, gentle at first, then more insistent. Despite every instinct screaming at me not to look, I turned. A face pressed against the glass, so close that its breath fogged the window. It had Lisa's features, at least. I assumed it was Lisa from the few photos Marcus had shown me. But her eyes were wrong, entirely black, and her smile stretched impossibly wide across her face. "He brought you to save me," she said, her voice somehow clear despite the closed window between us. "But there's no saving anyone here, only joining." Her fingers, too long, too thin, traced patterns on the glass that matched the symbols carved into the trees and the mine entrance. Where her fingertips touched, the glass began to frost over, tiny cracks spreading outward like spider webs. I scrambled across to the passenger side, but another face waited there, Marcus, or what remained of him. His head still twisted at that impossible angle, eyes still bottomless pits. More faces appeared at every window, some human, some not. The cracks in the glass grew larger. The temperature inside the car dropped until each breath came out as a cloud of white vapor. I retreated to the center of the back seat, pulling my knees to my chest, watching in horror as the windows began to bulge inward under pressure from countless pushing hands. In desperation, I fumbled for my phone. The screen lit up, one bar of reception, a miracle, and I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. To my shock, it connected. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was distorted by static but unmistakably human, normal, a lifeline to the world I knew. "Help me," I gasped. "I'm in the forest outside Reno. Something's after me. My friend, I think he's dead. I'm trapped." A high-pitched whine cut through the connection, forcing me to pull the phone away from my ear. When I looked at the screen again, the call had ended. In its place was a text message from an unknown number. "No one can help you now." The driver's side window finally gave way with a sound like a gunshot, imploding in a shower of safety glass. Cold air rushed in, carrying that sweet rotting smell, stronger now. Lisa's distorted face pushed through the opening, followed by her neck, elongated, bent at an angle that should have been fatal, and shoulders that seemed to dislocate and relocate with each movement. "It won't hurt," she promised. her voice a chorus of whispers. Becoming part of it. Part of us. The pain is only temporary. I lunged for the glove compartment, searching frantically for anything I could use as a weapon. My hands closed around a road flare, standard emergency equipment I'd always kept in the car, but never expected to use. With shaking fingers, I struck the cap against the igniter. The flare burst to life in a shower of red sparks and chemical fire. The reaction was immediate and unexpected. The creatures surrounding my car recoiled from the light, their whispers turning to shrieks of pain or rage. The one that had been Lisa withdrew from the window, its form seeming to waver and disintegrate at the edges like burning paper. I had found a weakness. Light. Real light, not the feeble glow of flashlights or headlamps. Fire. Emboldened, I grabbed my backpack from the floor, stuffing it with what few supplies were within reach. My water bottle, energy bars, the Swiss Army knife, my nearly dead phone. Then, clutching the flare before me like a torch, I kicked open the passenger door and ran. The forest around me was alive with movement, shapes darting between trees, keeping to the shadows beyond the flare's red glow. The ground beneath my feet felt wrong, spongy and yielding as if running on a waterbed. Several times I stumbled, nearly dropping the flare, which I knew would mean certain death. I had no destination in mind, no plan beyond putting distance between myself and the car, following the slight downward slope that I hoped would eventually lead to civilization. Behind me, I heard my car's alarm suddenly blare to life, though I hadn't set it and the electronics had been dead moments before. The sound cut off abruptly, replaced by a crunch of metal and breaking glass. I didn't look back. The flare was burning down, already half consumed. I needed to find help before it died completely. I don't know how long I ran. Time seemed meaningless in that nightmare forest. The trees all looked the same, the darkness absolute beyond my circle of red light. My legs ached, my lungs burned, and terror had long since given way to a numb determination to keep moving, keep fighting. The whispers followed me, sometimes distant, sometimes so close they seemed to come from inside my own head. We are patient. Your light will die, and then you will join us. The flare sputtered, its light dimming. In desperation, I looked around for anything that might burn, might provide more light. The forest floor was damp, covered in rotting leaves and moss that would never catch. But ahead, barely visible through the trees, I saw what looked like a structure, man-made, with straight edges that nature rarely produces. As the flare gave one final, bright flare before dying completely, I broke through the tree line into a small clearing. At its center stood a fire lookout tower, a simple wooden structure on stilts, with a cabin at the top and a ladder leading up to it. My heart leapt with hope. Lookout towers meant forest rangers, communication equipment, safety. I sprinted for the ladder just as the flare died in my hand. The whispers surged, triumphant, and the darkness around me seemed to congeal into moving shapes. Hands grabbed at my ankles as I climbed, fingers like twigs scratching at my skin. I kicked blindly, connecting with something solid that crumbled like rotten wood. The ladder swayed dangerously, but I kept climbing, one rung after another, until I reached the door of the cabin. It was locked. Of course it was locked. I pounded on it with my fists, screaming for help, though I knew with sickening certainty that no human ranger occupied this tower. Not anymore. Below me, the creatures were climbing, their movements jerky but determined. I could hear the wood creaking under their weight, feel the whole structure swaying. In desperation, I smashed the nearest window with my elbow, ignoring the glass that sliced my skin. I reached through, found the interior lock, and turned it. The door swung open, and I tumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. I dragged a chair in front of it, flimsy protection at best. The cabin was small, a single room with windows on all sides to provide a 360-degree view of the forest. Emergency supplies lined one wall, first aid kit, radio equipment, maps, and, miraculously, a landline phone. I lunged for it, dialed 911 again with bloody fingers. This time, the static was worse, but I could still make out the dispatcher's voice asking for my location. Fire lookout tower, I gasped. Forest outside Reno. I don't know exactly. There are maps here. I could. A sound like nails on a chalkboard cut through the connection, claws scraping at the door, the windows, the very walls of the cabin. Sir? Sir? Are you there? The dispatcher's voice faded in and out. Can you describe your emergency? Something's after me. I tried to explain, knowing how insane it sounded. Creatures in the forest. They killed my friend. They're not human. Please, send someone with lights, bright lights. The line went dead, not disconnected. The handset itself cracked in my grip, black fluid oozing from the fractures. The same fluid began to seep through the walls, the ceiling, bubbling up between the floorboards. The structures would groan like a living thing in pain or hunger. I backed away from the door as something heavy slammed against it repeatedly. The chair leg splintered, then gave way completely. The door burst open to reveal Lisa, or the thing wearing her shape. Behind her stood Marcus, and behind him, countless others, some recognizably human, others not. And looming above them all was the original creature from the mine shaft, its featureless face now sporting a wide grin that split its head nearly in half. The forest has waited so long for someone like you, Lisa said, her voice eerily normal despite her grotesquely elongated neck and the black voids of her eyes. Someone who can help us spread beyond these woods, into the cities. Marco was just the messenger. You're the key. I backed up until I hit the windows on the opposite side. Looking out, I could see nothing but darkness, until a flash of light caught my attention. Distant headlights on what had to be the main highway. I wasn't as deep in the forest as I'd thought. There was still hope. The creature that had been Marcus stepped forward. It doesn't hurt, Dan. Not for long. And then you're part of something bigger. Something ancient. Something hungry. His head rotated on his neck, turning upside down while his body remained upright. Don't fight it. I fought it. Lisa fought it. Look at us now. They moved as one, advancing across the small cabin. I grabbed the only weapon within reach, a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. Not fire, but it might buy me seconds. I pulled the pin and sprayed the white chemical foam directly at the creatures. They hissed and recoiled, their forms seeming to ripple and distort where the foam touched them. In that moment of confusion, I made my decision. The window behind me, the highway in the distance. No time to climb down the ladder. No guarantee these things couldn't move faster through the trees than I could run. There was only one way out. I turned, used the extinguisher to smash the window completely clear of glass, and looked down. 50 feet, maybe more, to the ground below. Daniel. The voice came from directly behind me, a chorus of whispers that contained Marcus, Lisa, and countless others. Don't. You'll only delay the inevitable. Break your legs in the fall, and we'll have you before you crawl a yard. I turned to face them one last time. They filled the cabin now, pressed together in a writhing mass of twisted limbs and two wide smiles. The black fluid that had seeped from the walls now covered them, binding them together like a grotesque living tapestry. At their center, the original creature extended a long, bark-covered arm toward me, its fingertips just inches from my face. The forest wants you, Daniel, it said in a voice like rustling leaves. The forest needs you. I stepped backward through the broken window and fell. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs, pain exploding through my body. But I hadn't hit the ground. I'd landed on the roof of my CRV, which now sat directly beneath the tower, its metal frame dented but intact. Impossible. I'd left the car miles back in the forest. Unless the forest really had been reshaping itself around me, herding me back to this spot all along. Above me, the creatures poured from the tower windows like black smoke, reforming into their twisted shapes as they hit the ground. I rolled off the roof, landing hard on my side, a sharp pain in my ankle suggesting a sprain or worse. The driver's door hung open, the keys still in the ignition. Another impossibility, another trap. But what choice did I have? I dragged myself into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine roared to life immediately, the gas gauge showing full. I slammed the door shut just as Lisa's distorted face pressed against the window again. You can't escape us, she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. We're in your head now, part of you. Wherever you go, we'll find you, or you'll find your way back to us. I floored the accelerator. The tires spun in the dirt before finding purchase, and the CRV lurched forward. Lisa's form was thrown clear, dissolving into something like black smoke before reforming behind me. In the rearview mirror, I could see the others giving chase, not running but gliding, their feet hovering inches above the ground, moving with impossible speed. The Forest Service road appeared before me, wider, better maintained than I remembered. I took it without hesitation, the car bouncing violently over ruts and exposed roots. The dashboard clock read 3:17 a.m., though it felt like days had passed since nightfall. My hands were slick with blood, some from the glass cuts, some from the black fluid that had somehow gotten on me during the confrontation in the tower. The shapes in my rearview mirror fell behind, unable to match the car's speed. For the first time in hours, I allowed myself to hope. The main highway couldn't be far now. Civilization. Safety. People who would help me, who would believe me when I told them about Marcus and the creatures in the forest. The trees began to thin, and I could see the glow of distant lights ahead. Street lamps, perhaps, or the lights of Reno itself. Just a few more miles. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. Against my better judgment, I pulled it out, glancing down at the screen. A single text message from Marcus's number. "You're going the wrong way." When I looked up, she was standing in the middle of the road, the woman in white I'd seen earlier. This time, she raised her head, pushing the dark hair away from her face. It was Lisa, but not the twisted, inhuman version that had pursued me. This Lisa looked scared, desperate, human. She mouthed a single word: "Run." I swerved to avoid her, the car fishtailing wildly. As I fought to regain control, my headlights illuminated a massive fallen tree blocking the road ahead, one that definitely hadn't been there moments before. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The CRV hit the trunk at full speed, the airbags deploying with a force that felt like being punched in the face. Dazed, ears ringing, I fumbled with my seatbelt. The crash had accordioned the front of my car, trapping my legs under the crushed dashboard. The pain hit me then, sharp, intense, suggesting at least one broken bone. But it was nothing compared to the terror that surged through me as I saw them approaching, a procession of twisted figures emerging from the darkness beyond the reach of my failing headlights. They took their time now, confident in their victory. The thing that had been Marcus reached the car first, its elongated fingers pushing effortlessly through the cracked windshield, reaching for me. "It's time, Dan," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers layered over my friend's once familiar tone. Time to become part of something greater. As its cold fingers brushed my cheek, I made a desperate grab for the only weapon left, my Swiss Army knife, still in my backpack on the passenger seat. The blade was pathetically small against these creatures, but I slashed wildly, catching the thing's wrist. Black fluid spurted from the wound, hissing where it touched the upholstery, the dashboard, my skin. The creature withdrew with a shriek, but others took its place, hands reaching through every broken window, the roof peeling back like the lid of a sardine can. I felt them then, not just their physical touch, but their presence inside my mind. Memories that weren't mine flooded my consciousness. A miner in the 1800s, discovering something ancient buried deep in a copper vein. Hikers finding strange symbols carved into trees decades ago. Marcus and Lisa stumbling upon the mine entrance 3 years earlier. Countless others who had been absorbed into this collective consciousness that called itself the forest. The pain in my legs faded, replaced by a spreading numbness that crept up my body. Where their hands touched me, my skin began to change, hardening, darkening, taking on the texture of bark. My bones shifted beneath the surface, joints bending in new and impossible ways. I tried to scream but found my mouth filled with something thick and bitter, like rotting leaves. Through the broken windshield, I could see the lights of the highway, tantalizingly close. A pair of headlights appeared, a car approaching on the main road. I tried to call out, to signal for help, but no sound emerged. The numbness had reached my throat, my tongue. The other driver would never see me here, trapped among the trees in my wrecked car, being consumed by the forest. As my vision began to dim, I had one final, crystal-clear thought. This wasn't a random attack. Marcus hadn't brought me here by chance. The forest had been calling to me all along. Through him, through dreams I couldn't remember upon waking, through strange impulses that had made his invitation seem so appealing. It had been patient, waiting years since it first touched Marcus's mind. And now it had me. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me completely was my own reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes already transformed into bottomless black pits, my mouth stretched in an inhuman grin that split my face nearly in half. My hand, now more branch than flesh, raised of its own accord to wave goodbye to Daniel Scott Winters, to welcome whatever I was becoming. 3 days later, a search party found my CRV crashed against a tree just off Forest Service Road 237. The driver's door stood open, but there was no sign of me. Only strange markings carved into the dashboard and seat leather, and a thick, black substance that the forensic team couldn't identify. Marcus's blue Jeep was discovered at a campsite 2 miles away, similarly abandoned. Both of us were added to the growing list of disappearances in the Reno National Forest. The search was called off after a week. The official report cited animal attack or exposure as the most likely cause of death, though no bodies were ever recovered. A memorial service was held in Sacramento, attended by my parents, colleagues, and a few college friends who remembered Marcus fondly. No one mentioned the strange dreams they'd been having since my disappearance. Dreams of trees with human faces, of whispers that called them by name, of a forest that waited patiently for their return. Sometimes, late at night, hikers report seeing lights deep in the woods where no trails lead. Rangers investigate but find nothing, or if they do, they never return to file their reports. Occasionally, campers at designated sites miles from where Marcus and I disappeared wake to find strange symbols carved into the trees surrounding their tents, wet with what looks like fresh sap. And if you drive the highway that skirts the edge of those woods late at night, you might catch a glimpse of a figure standing just beyond the tree line. A man with a twisted neck and too wide smile, waving for you to join him. If you do, you might hear whispers carried on the wind. The forest is waiting. The forest is hungry. The forest wants you. Don't listen. Don't stop. And whatever you do, don't go camping in those woods. We're always watching, always waiting for new friends to join us in the darkness beneath the trees. I'm Ethan Cole Bradley, 34 years old, and I call Sacramento, California, home. Life's decent out there, sunny days, busy streets, and a job that keeps me sane most of the time. But me and my crew, Mia Rose Fletcher and Owen Lee Hayes, needed a break from the grind. Mia's 30, sharp as a tack with this contagious energy, always up for anything. Owen's 36, a big dude with a quiet streak, but he's got your back no matter what. We've been thick as thieves since our college days in Sac. This year, we hatched a plan to go car camping. Nothing fancy, just piling into our rides and crashing somewhere wild. I've got my trusty Toyota 4Runner, beat up but reliable, perfect for sleeping in the back. Mia's rolling in her Honda CRV, and Owen's got his Dodge Durango, all scratched up from years of hauling his fishing gear. Reno, Nevada, caught our eye, close enough for a weekend trip, far enough to feel like an escape. Plus, Mia swore the desert around there had some unreal spots. We hit the road late Friday afternoon, a 3-hour haul from Sacramento. I'm leading the pack, tunes cranked, with Mia's CRV behind me and Owen's Durango bringing up the rear. The drive's smooth, I-80 cutting through mountains and flattening out into that wide, dusty Nevada stretch. We're laughing over the phone, hands-free, of course, about dumb stuff, like that time Owen fell into a lake trying to reel in a fish. Feels good, you know? Reno greets us with that neon glow as the sun dips low, but we're not here for the slots. We veer north, aiming for the Pa-Ra Range, a rugged chunk of nowhere Mia found online. The pavement turns to gravel, my 4Runner bouncing along, and we pull into this flat spot surrounded by jagged hills and scruffy junipers. It's remote, perfect for us. I kill the engine, step out, and stretch, the dry air hitting my lungs. Mia's already hopping out of her CRV, grinning like a kid, dragging a cooler over. Owen lumbers out of his Durango, cracking his neck and muttering about the drive. We've got our setup down pat. Park the cars in a loose triangle, crack open some beers, and let the night take over. I pop my tailgate, toss a sleeping pad in the back, and figure it'll be cozy enough. Mia's fiddling with her Honda, double-checking locks. She's got this thing about security. The sky's turning this deep purple, stars poking through, and we're kicking back with a little fire going. Nothing big, just some twigs and a fire starter Owen brought. Mia's roasting hot dogs on sticks, passing them around, and I'm leaning against my 4Runner, sipping a cold one. Owen sprawled out, staring at the flames, quiet like always. It's chill, peaceful, Exactly what we needed after weeks of city noise. Night creeps in fast out here, the temperature dropping sharp. Mia's joking about how we're gonna freeze our butts off, but she's got extra blankets in her car. I climb into my 4Runner, wiggle into my sleeping bag, and crack the window just a hair. Fresh air's a must. Owen's in his Durango, door half open like he don't care, and Mia's locked up tight in her CRV, probably double-checking her keys again. I'm drifting off. The silence out here's so thick it's almost heavy. The fire's down to embers, and the hills around us are just dark shapes against the sky. Feels like we're the only ones for miles, and I'm loving it. Total freedom, no worries. Just me, my buddies, and this wide-open nowhere. My eyes are heavy, sleep tugging at me, when I catch it. Real faint, like a whisper on the wind. Something's moving out there, not close, but enough to make me pause. I shake it off, tell myself it's nothing, and settle back in. Man, I should have listened to that little nudge in my gut. I jolt awake in my 4Runner, heart thumping like I just ran a mile. It's dark, pitch black, and my sleeping bag's twisted around my legs. Something woke me, but I can't place it. Just this weird itch in my brain telling me to sit up. I fumble for my phone. 3:42 a.m. No signal. Figures. The air's colder now, seeping through that cracked window, and I'm rubbing my eyes, trying to shake the grogginess. Outside, the silence is deafening. No wind, no critters, just this heavy stillness that's creeping me out. I lean over, peek through the windshield, and see Mia's CRV and Owen's Durango parked where we left them. The fire's long dead, just a faint glow of ash. Then I hear it. Real soft, this low hum, like a machine idling way off in the distance. I tell myself it's nothing, maybe a truck on some far-off road, but it's nagging at me. I grab my flashlight, flick it on, and shine it out the window. The beam cuts across the clearing. Empty, just rocks and junipers casting long, twisty shadows. I'm about to call it nerves when Mia's voice hisses through the dark, sharp and tight. "Ethan, you up?" She's sitting up in her CRV, window cracked just enough to talk. I nod, whisper back, "Yeah, you hear that hum?" She's tense, says it's been going for a few minutes, getting louder. Owen's stirring now, his big frame shifting in the Durango. He sticks his head out, grumbling. "What's with the chatter?" Mia fills him in, and he squints into the night, scratching his beard. "Probably some generator or something," he mutters, but he don't sound convinced. I'm climbing out of my car now, boots crunching on the gravel, and the hum's clearer, steady, mechanical, but off somehow, like it's broken. We're all outside, huddled by my 4Runner, flashlights darting around. Mia's clutching her hoodie tight, saying it don't feel right. Too close for a road, too weird for out here. I'm nodding, cause yeah, it's starting to mess with me too. Owen's the one who suggests we check it out, just a quick look to settle our nerves. Better than sitting here freaking ourselves out, he says, grabbing a tire iron from his Durango like it's no big deal. I'm torn. Part of me wants to stay put, but that hum's drilling into my skull now, louder, insistent. All right, but we stick together, I say, grabbing my own flashlight tighter. Mia's hesitant, but she nods, pulling a pocket knife from her glove box. Girls always prepared. We start walking toward the sound, out past the cars, the hills looming dark and jagged around us. The ground's uneven, rocks slipping under my boots, and the hum's shifting, closer 1 second, farther the next, like it's moving. We're maybe 50 yards out when Mia stops dead, grabs my arm. "Look," she whispers, pointing. There's a faint glow up ahead, low to the ground, flickering through the junipers. My stomach twists. This ain't no truck or generator, not way out here. I shine my light toward it, and the glow cuts out, like whatever it was saw us coming. The hum drops too, replaced by this faint, scratchy static, like a busted radio. Owen's muttering under his breath, tire iron gripped tight, and Mia's breathing fast, saying we should head back. I'm with her. This is getting too freaky. But then something shifts in the dark, a quick blur between the trees, and my flashlight catches it for a split second. Something metal, glinting, low to the ground. My mouth's dry, pulse racing, and I'm backing up, telling him, "Let's move now." We're turning, heading for the cars, when that static spikes, loud, sharp, right behind us. I whip around, light shaking in my hand, and there's nothing, just empty dark. But I know we're not alone out here, and whatever's watching us ain't friendly. I'm stumbling back toward the cars, flashlight jittering in my hand, that static buzzing in my ears like a swarm of angry bees. Mia's right beside me, her pocket knife out, eyes darting everywhere, and Owen's bringing up the rear, tire iron swinging like he's ready to smash something. The air's thick now, heavy with this weird, oily smell, like burnt rubber and rust mixed together. My gut's screaming at me to run faster, but my legs feel like lead. We're almost to the clearing when that static cuts out. Dead silence, just for a heartbeat. Then it explodes back, louder, closer, shredding the night. I spin around, shining my light, and there it is, scuttling out of the junipers. It's low, maybe 3 feet off the ground, all jagged metal and twitching legs, like some messed up robot spider, but wrong, so wrong. Its body's patched together, rusted plates and wires dangling, and it's got these glowing red pinpoints where eyes should be. Mia gasps, staggers back, and I'm frozen, staring at this thing that don't belong in any world I know. Owen's the first to move, yelling, "What the hell?" and chucking a rock at it. The rock pings off its side, and it jerks, fast, those legs clicking on the ground as it charges us. I snap out at it, grab Mia's arm, and yell, "Go, go." We're bolting for the cars, that thing's static screeching behind us like a busted speaker. My 4 runners in sight, parked next to Mia's CRV, and I'm shoving her toward it, shouting, "Get in." Owen's right behind, but then I hear him grunt, hard, and I turn just in time to see that thing slam into him. It's got these sharp, claw-like legs, and one catches his calf, ripping through his jeans. He swings the tire iron, connects with a clang, but it barely flinches, pinning him down. I'm running back, adrenaline pumping, yelling his name, but Mia's pulling at me, screaming, "Ethan, we can't." Owen's fighting, kicking at it, blood pooling under his leg, and that thing's head tilts, like it's studying him, those red lights flaring bright. I'm torn, my chest tight, but it's too fast. It slashes again, and Owen's scream cuts off, gurgling wet. I'm shaking, realizing he's done, and Mia's dragging me to my car. We're at the 4Runner, and I'm fumbling with the door, hands slick with sweat. That thing's still on Owen, tearing into him. I can't look, but the sounds are awful, metal grinding and flesh ripping. Mia's in her CRV now, engine roaring, and I'm slamming my door shut, locking it. My hands are trembling so bad I drop the keys, scrabbling under the seat to grab, and while that static screeches closer, way too close, I jam the key in, turn it, and the 4Runner sputters to life. Through the windshield, I see it. It's done with Owen, his body crumpled in the dirt, and now it's skittering toward us, those legs clicking fast. Mia's peeling out, tires kicking up gravel, and I'm right behind her, flooring it. The thing lunges, slams into my tailgate, metal groans, and I feel the jolt, but I don't stop, just keep going. The clearing's a blur, my headlights bouncing off rocks and trees, and that thing's chasing us, darting between junipers like it's built for this terrain. My rear view's a mess of red lights and twitching metal, and I'm shouting at Mia through the open window, "Keep moving." She's ahead, weaving, and I'm praying my 4Runner holds up, 'cause this ain't no animal. This is something scary, something that don't make sense. My heart's in my throat, that oily smell seeping in through the vents, and I'm gripping the wheel, dodging ruts in the gravel. Owen's gone, ripped apart in seconds, and I'm kicking myself for letting us walk out there. Whatever this thing is, it's not just hunting, it's playing with us, and we're barely hanging on. I'm flooring it down the gravel road, my 4Runner bouncing hard over ruts, the steering wheel jerking in my hands. Mia's CRV is just ahead, taillights glowing red through the dust, and that thing, that freaky metal spider, is right on us, its legs clicking like a machine gun on the ground. My tailgate's dented from where it rammed me, and I can hear it scraping closer, that static screech tearing through the night. My chest's tight, Owen's bloody mess flashing in my head, and I'm muttering, come on, like it'll make us go faster. The road's a mess, twisting through the Pah-Ra hills, rocks pinging off my undercarriage, and I'm swerving to keep up with Mia. She's driving like a maniac, weaving around junipers, and I catch a glimpse of her face in her side mirror. Pale, eyes wide. That thing darts to my left, keeping pace, those red lights flashing in the dark. I yank the wheel hard, trying to sideswipe it, but it's too quick, skitters out of the way and lunges again, clawing at my passenger door. Metal screeches, my window cracks, spider webbing, and I flinch, ducking low. "Get off my car, you freak!" I yell, slamming the gas harder. Mia's shouting something out of her window, but the wind's roaring in my ears, drowning her out. I glance back, and it's right there, lashed onto my tailgate now, tearing at it with those jagged legs. The whole back end shakes. I'm losing control, tires slipping, and I'm thinking, this is it, we're dead. Then Mia pulls a wild move. She cranks her CRV sharp, cuts across my path, and rams the thing head on. It's a brutal hit. Her hood crumples, the spider thing screeches, and it tumbles off my car, rolling into the dirt. I slam the brakes, skid to a stop, and she's already reversing, shouting, "Go, Ethan, go!" I don't argue. Floor it again, my 4Runner groaning but moving, and she's right behind me, her front end smoking. We're booking it now, that thing scrambling back to its feet in my rear view, dented, sparking, but still coming. The road's opening up, the hills thinning out, and I can see I-80 ahead, those faint highway lights like a lifeline. My hands are slick on the wheel, sweat stinging my eyes, and I'm yelling at Mia. "We're almost there." She nods, her CRV limping but keeping pace, and I'm praying it holds together. That static's back, loud and warped, and I catch it in my side mirror. It's gaining again, leaping over rocks like some nightmare machine. It's close, 10 feet, maybe less, and it jumps, aiming for Mia this time. She swerves, clips it with her bumper, and it spins off, crashing into a juniper. I'm holding my breath, waiting for it to get up, but we're hitting pavement now, tires squealing as we merge onto the highway. Cars honk, headlights flash, normal people, oblivious, and I'm weaving through traffic, Mia right on my tail. My heart's pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat, and I'm checking every mirror, expecting that thing to come barreling out of the dark. The oily smell's fading, the static's gone, and we're pushing 80 miles an hour, Reno's glow growing brighter ahead. I'm shaking, gripping the wheel like it's keeping me alive. Mia pulls up beside me, her window down, yelling, "You okay?" I nod, barely my voice shot. "Owen," I start, but can't finish. He's gone, torn apart, and we barely made it. That thing's still out there, I know it, and I'm flooring it harder, the highway stretching out like our only shot. We're alive, but it don't feel like winning, not even close. I'm barreling down I-80, the 4Runner's engine roaring, Reno's lights smearing into a blurry glow ahead. Mia's CRV is glued to my side, her crumpled hood rattling, and we're both pushing the speed limit, dodging late-night traffic. My hands are trembling on the wheel, that dented tailgate creaking every time I hit a bump. Owen's gone, ripped apart by that metal freak, and it's sinking in hard, like a punch I can't shake off. The highway's humming under us, but I'm still checking my mirrors, half expecting those red lights to flare up behind me. We're maybe 5 miles out of the Para range when Mia signals, waving me toward an exit. I follow, pulling off into a truck stop, neon signs, diesel fumes, a couple semis idling. My 4Runner screeches to a stop next to her CRV, and I'm out of the car before the engine's even settled, legs wobbly. Mia stumbles out, her face streaked with dirt and tears, and she's on me, grabbing my jacket. "We made it, Ethan, we're okay," she says, but her voice cracks. She don't believe it either. I'm pacing, kicking gravel, that oily smell still clinging to my clothes. "Owen's dead, Mia. We left him back there." She flinches, looks away, and I'm kicking myself. Why we go looking for that home? Should have stayed put, locked the doors, anything but play hero. My tailgate's trashed, her hood's a mess, and we're standing here like idiots, shell-shocked under the buzzing lights. A trucker glances our way, probably thinking we're drunks, but I don't care. Mia's digging in her CRV, pulling out her phone, still no signal this far out. "We gotta call someone," she mutters, shaking. I nod, but my head's spinning. Cops? Rangers? What do I even say? Hey, a robot spider killed our buddy. Sounds insane, but I saw it, felt it slam my car. I'm leaning against my 4Runner, trying to breathe. When I notice it, my tailgate's not just dented. There's this weird, sticky residue, black and slick, smeared across the metal. I wipe at it, and it stinks, like that burnt rubber smell, but sharper, chemical. "Mia, check this out," I call, and she's over in a flash, frowning at it. "What the hell?" She starts, then freezes. Her eyes go wide, and I follow her gaze, across the lot. Maybe 50 yards out, those red pinpoints flicker in the dark, low to the ground. My stomach drops. It followed us. That freaky thing tracked us all the way here. I'm yelling, "Get in, now!" And we're scrambling. Me to my 4Runner, her to her CRV. Engines roar, but I'm too slow. My doors barely shut when it hits, slamming into my driver's side. The whole car rocks, windows shattering, and I'm screaming, glass cutting my arm. It's clawing at me, those metal legs slashing, and I kick at it, adrenaline pumping. Mia's ramming it with her CRV, horn blaring, and it staggers back, sparking. I floor it, peeling out of the lot, Mia right behind, but my arm's bleeding bad, soaking my sleeve. The thing's chasing, skittering across the pavement, and I'm weaving, vision blurring, shock setting in. We're back on I-80, pushing 90, and it's gaining, a blur of metal and red lights. Mia's shouting through her window, "Hang on, Ethan," but I'm fading, the wheel slipping in my hands. It's my fault. I stop looking ahead, just for a second, staring at those lights in my mirror. The 4Runner drifts, clips the guardrail, and I'm spinning. Metal screams, tires blow, and I'm crashing hard, rolling down an embankment. Everything's a blur, pain exploding, and I hear Mia scream my name before it all goes black. That thing's out there. Mia's alone now, and I'm trapped in this wreck. Our big escape turned into a tragedy, all 'cause I couldn't let it go. My name is Michael Anthony Reynolds, and I have 28 years old. I live in Sacramento with my fiancée, Jessica, who I've been with for 3 years now. We're both outdoor enthusiasts, though I wouldn't call us experts by any means. We're just regular people who enjoy getting away from the city once in a while. Jessica works as a nurse at the local hospital, and I'm a software developer for a small tech company. We've been planning to get married next summer, but after what happened during our camping trip to Reno, I'm not sure there's going to be a wedding anymore. It was Jessica's idea to try car camping. Why bother with tents when we can just convert my SUV into a cozy little sleeping area? She'd said one evening while we were scrolling through Instagram photos of people who had transformed their vehicles into miniature mobile homes. Her Honda CRV was spacious enough once we folded down the back seats, and the idea of having a solid barrier between us and whatever lurked in the wilderness at night appealed to me. We spent weeks planning the trip, buying supplies, and modifying the car with blackout curtains and a custom-cut memory foam mattress. We invited Jessica's brother, Daniel, and his girlfriend, Leah, to join us. Daniel is 2 years younger than Jessica, with the same brown eyes and easy smile. He works as a park ranger outside of Sacramento, so he knows his way around the outdoors better than any of us. Leah is a quiet but friendly woman who teaches 5th grade. I'd only met her a handful of times before our trip, but she seemed nice enough, always bringing homemade cookies or bread whenever we got together. The plan was to drive to the outskirts of Reno, near the Tahoe National Forest area, where Daniel knew of some secluded spots perfect for car camping. "It's beautiful there," he told us during our planning session at our apartment. "There's a spot about 20 minutes from the main road where you can park right next to this small lake. Not many people know about it. In retrospect, perhaps there was a reason not many people went there." We set out on a Friday afternoon in early October. The weather forecast predicted clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect for our weekend getaway. Jessica and I took her CRV, while Daniel and Leah followed in Daniel's Jeep Wrangler. The 4-hour drive from Sacramento to our destination near Reno was filled with excited chatter about the hikes we planned to take and the meals we'd cook over the portable camping stove. As we left the highway and turned onto increasingly narrow roads, I felt a growing sense of isolation that was both thrilling and vaguely disturbing. Cell service became spotty, then disappeared entirely. The roads turned from asphalt to gravel to dirt, and the trees grew denser around us. Jessica was checking the GPS on her phone, but it wasn't updating properly without service. "Daniel knows where we're going," she reassured me, glancing at the Jeep in our rearview mirror. When we finally reached our destination, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the small clearing by the lake. The spot was indeed beautiful, a flat area large enough for both vehicles, surrounded by tall pines, with the small, mirror-like lake just steps away. It was also completely deserted, which at the time seemed like a stroke of luck. "Wow, we have the whole place to ourselves," Jessica exclaimed as we stepped out of the car, stretching our legs after the long drive. Daniel pulled up beside us and killed the engine. "What did I tell you? Perfect spot, right?" he said, hopping out of his Jeep. Leah joined him, her face lighting up as she took in the scenery. "It's gorgeous," she breathed. I had to agree, though something about the stillness of the lake and the density of the surrounding forest made me uneasy. There wasn't even the sound of birds or insects, just an unnatural quiet that seemed to press in on us from all sides. But I brushed it off as just being tired from the drive and started unpacking our supplies. We spent that first evening setting up our camping area, arranging our cars side by side to create a small communal space in between. We hung string lights between the vehicles, set up our portable table and chairs, and got a small campfire going in the designated fire pit. As darkness fell completely, we roasted hot dogs and marshmallows, told jokes, and played card games by lantern light. It was everything a camping trip should be, until Daniel decided to tell us about the local legends. "So, did you guys know this area has quite a history?" Daniel said casually as he poked at the dying embers of our campfire. The flames cast eerie shadows across his face, making his usually friendly features look sinister. Jessica rolled her eyes. "Please don't start with your ghost stories, Dan." But Leah and I were intrigued. "What kind of history?" I asked, pulling my jacket tighter around me as a sudden chill ran through the air. Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice dramatically. "Well, back in the gold rush days, there was a small mining camp not far from here. Story goes that one harsh winter, they got snowed in. Supplies ran low, and well, let's just say not everyone made it out alive." He wiggled his eyebrows suggestively. "They say on quiet nights, you can still hear the screams of the miners who were sacrificed for the good of the group." Jessica threw a marshmallow at him. "You're making that up," Daniel laughed, catching the marshmallow and popping it into his mouth. "Maybe, maybe not. But people have reported strange things in these woods. Hikers gone missing, weird noises in the night, shadowy figures between the trees." His voice dropped even lower. "And about 10 years ago, a family camping not far from here vanished without a trace. Their car was still here, food half-eaten on the table, but no sign of the people. They never found them." A heavy silence fell over our group. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out forced and hollow. "Nice try, Daniel. You almost had us going there." But the uneasy feeling that had been nagging at me since our arrival intensified. I glanced at the dark wall of trees surrounding our little oasis of light, suddenly feeling very exposed. Was it my imagination, or had something moved just beyond the reach of our fire's glow? We decided to turn in soon after that. As Jessica and I settled into our makeshift bed in the back of her CRV, I couldn't shake the lingering discomfort from Daniel's stories. "Your brother has a twisted sense of humor," I whispered to Jessica as we snuggled under our double sleeping bag. She yawned and nestled closer to me. "He's always been like that. Don't let him get to you." But as we lay there, I could have sworn I heard something moving outside, a shuffling sound, too deliberate to be just the wind. I woke sometime in the middle of the night to a strange scratching sound against the side of the car. Jessica was still sound asleep beside me, her breathing deep and even. I lay perfectly still, straining my ears. The scratching continued, moving slowly from the back of the vehicle toward the front, like someone, or something, was dragging their fingers along the metal. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I wanted to wake Jessica, but found myself paralyzed with fear. The scratching stopped at the driver's side window. I held my breath, waiting. Then, a soft tapping, like fingernails against glass. One tap, then two, then three in quick succession. I squeezed my eyes shut, telling myself it was just a branch moved by the wind, or maybe an animal curious about our presence. But deep down, I knew it wasn't either of those things. After what felt like an eternity, the tapping stopped, and I heard what sounded like footsteps moving away from the car, crunching softly on the fallen pine needles. When morning came, I was exhausted from a night of fitful sleep. Jessica noticed my bloodshot eyes as we crawled out of the CRV into the bright morning sunlight. "Rough night?" she asked, concerned. I hesitated, then told her about the scratching and tapping. She frowned, then walked around the car, examining the exterior. "I don't see any scratches," she said, running her hand along the side where I'd heard the sound. Must have been a dream. Daniel and Leah emerged from their Jeep, looking well-rested and cheerful. As we prepared breakfast on our portable stove, I casually asked if they'd heard anything unusual during the night. Daniel shook his head, but Leah paused, a troubled look crossing her face. "I thought I heard someone calling my name," she admitted quietly. "It sounded like it was coming from the direction of the lake. Did any of you guys get up during the night?" We all shook our heads, and an uncomfortable silence fell over our little group. As we ate our breakfast of instant oatmeal and coffee, we discussed our plans for the day. Daniel suggested a hike to a nearby ridge that supposedly offered spectacular views of the surrounding area. Despite my lingering unease, the bright daylight had restored some of my confidence, and the idea of exploring seemed appealing. We packed some sandwiches, filled our water bottles, and set off into the woods, following a faint trail that Daniel assured us would lead to our destination. The forest was dense and oddly quiet. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush, just the sound of our own footsteps and breathing. About an hour into our hike, Jessica stopped abruptly. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" she asked, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I was surprised. Jessica wasn't usually the jumpy type, but now that she mentioned it, I did have a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like unseen eyes were following our every move. Daniel laughed off Jessica's concerns, but there was a strain in his voice I hadn't noticed before. "It's just the woods playing tricks on your mind," he said, a bit too dismissively. "Let's keep going. We're almost at the ridge." We continued our hike, but the feeling of being observed intensified with each step. The trees seemed to close in around us, and the trail became increasingly difficult to follow, often disappearing entirely before reappearing several yards ahead. After another 30 minutes of hiking, I realized we hadn't seen any wildlife at all, not a single squirrel, bird, or even an insect. The forest was completely devoid of the normal sounds and movements you'd expect in nature. It was as if all living creatures had abandoned this place, fleeing from something they sensed, but we couldn't yet see. I mentioned this to the group, and even Daniel couldn't dismiss the unnatural stillness. "It is weird," he admitted, scanning the trees with a furrowed brow. "Maybe there was a fire or something recently that drove away the wildlife." We reached a small clearing and decided to take a break. As we sat on fallen logs eating our sandwiches, Leah suddenly pointed to something at the edge of the clearing. "What's that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. We all turned to look. Half hidden in the undergrowth was what appeared to be a small cairn of stones, carefully balanced one atop the other. Beside it, tied to a low branch, hung several small bundles of twigs bound with what looked like human hair. "That's not natural," Jessica whispered, instinctively moving closer to me. Daniel stood up and approached the strange arrangement, despite Leah's protests. He examined the cairn and the bundles without touching them, then returned to us, his face pale. "Probably just some weird art project," he said with forced casualness. "People do strange things in the woods." But none of us believed that explanation, and a heavy sense of dread settled over our group. We decided to head back to our campsite, the ridge forgotten. As we retraced our steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that the trail looked different somehow. The landmarks I'd mentally noted on our way up were either missing or altered. Daniel, who had been confidently leading us earlier, now hesitated at certain junctions, second-guessing himself. "I could have sworn we came from that direction," he muttered at one point, pointing to a path that none of us recognized. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky when we finally stumbled back into our camping area, much later than it should have taken us. Relief washed over me at the sight of our vehicles, still parked side by side exactly as we'd left them. But that relief was short-lived. As we approached, Jessica grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. "Michael," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Someone's been here." Our camping area had been disturbed. The chairs we'd left neatly around the unlit fire pit were now arranged in a perfect circle, all facing inward. Our cooler, which had been inside Jessica's CRV, was now sitting in the center of the circle, open, its contents, our food supplies, missing. Most disturbing of all, on each of our car windshields, drawn in what looked horribly like blood, was the same crude symbol, a circle with a jagged line through it. "We need to leave," Leah said immediately, her voice high and thin with panic. "Now." None of us argued. We hurriedly gathered what remained of our supplies, not bothering to pack neatly, just shoving everything into the cars as quickly as possible. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my phone twice. Daniel kept glancing nervously at the tree line, as if expecting someone, or something, to emerge at any moment. We were almost finished loading the cars when we heard it, a long, low whistle from somewhere in the forest, followed by what sounded like a reply from the opposite direction. Then another whistle from yet another location. The sound echoed around us, coming from all sides. They're surrounding us. Jessica breathed, her face deathly pale. Daniel fumbled with his keys, dropping them in his haste. As he bent to retrieve them, a rock sailed out of the trees, missing his head by inches. That was all the prompting we needed. We scrambled into our vehicles, Daniel and Leah in the Jeep, Jessica and I in the CRV. I turned the key in the ignition with a silent prayer. What if it didn't start? But the engine roared to life, and I could have cried with relief. Daniel's Jeep started as well, and he pulled out first, heading for the narrow dirt road that was our only way out. We followed close behind, the CRV bouncing violently as I drove faster than was safe on the uneven ground. As we entered the tree line at the edge of the clearing, I glanced in the rearview mirror and felt my blood turn to ice. Standing at the edge of the lake were three figures, tall, unnaturally thin, and completely motionless. They were too far away to make out clearly, but something about their stillness, the way they simply watched us flee, sent a wave of primal terror through me. I pressed my foot harder on the accelerator, desperate to put as much distance as possible between us and whatever was back there. The dirt road seemed narrower than I remembered, branches scraping against the sides of the CRV as we sped along behind Daniel's Jeep. The sun was setting rapidly now, the forest growing darker by the minute. Jessica clutched the dashboard, her knuckles white, as we bounced and jolted over the uneven terrain. "Don't slow down," she urged whenever I was forced to reduce speed for a particularly rough patch. "No matter what, don't stop." We had been driving for about 15 minutes when Daniel's Jeep suddenly braked ahead of us. I slammed on my own brakes, narrowly avoiding a collision. "What the hell is he doing?" I hissed, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. Then I saw it, a massive tree trunk blocking the road. It hadn't been there when we drove in, I was certain of that. The trunk was huge, at least 3 feet in diameter, and there was no way around it. Dense undergrowth and steep embankments lined both sides of the narrow road. Daniel got out of his Jeep and approached the fallen tree. I rolled down my window to shout at him to get back in the car, but the words died in my throat when I saw his face. He looked confused, disoriented. "This doesn't make sense," he called back to us. "This road, it's not right. This isn't the way we came in." A cold dread washed over me as I realized he was right. The surroundings were unfamiliar. We were on a completely different road than the one we'd taken to reach our campsite. Jessica and I got out to join Daniel and Leah, instinctively huddling together as we tried to make sense of our situation. "How is this possible?" Leah asked, her voice trembling. We followed the only road out. Daniel pulled out his phone, but as expected, there was no signal. His GPS app opened, but the blue dot that should have shown our location was missing. According to the digital map, we weren't anywhere. "We need to turn around," Daniel finally said, his ranger training kicking in despite his obvious fear. "Go back to the campsite and try to find the correct road." None of us liked that idea, but we had little choice. Daniel carefully maneuvered his Jeep to turn around on the narrow path, and I did the same with the CRV. As we completed the turn, Jessica suddenly grabbed my arm. "Michael," she whispered, pointing at something through the windshield. "Look." Standing in the middle of the road, about 50 yards back in the direction we had come from, was a figure. In the fading light, it was difficult to make out details, but it appeared to be a person, tall and thin, wearing what looked like ragged dark clothing. The figure stood perfectly still, facing us, blocking our path. "Drive around it," Jessica urged, her nails digging into my forearm. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. I put the CRV in gear and started forward slowly, planning to give the figure a wide berth. Daniel had seen it too and was ahead of us, his Jeep creeping forward. As we got closer, my headlights illuminated the figure more clearly, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. What I had taken for clothing was not clothing at all. The figure's body seemed to be covered in some kind of dark, matted material that hung in strips. And its proportions were wrong. Arms too long, torso too narrow, head oddly shaped. When we were about 30 yards away, the figure suddenly moved, dropping to all fours with an unnatural, fluid motion that no human could duplicate. It remained there for a moment, like some terrible beast, before scuttling rapidly to the side of the road and disappearing into the trees. Jessica let out a choked sob beside me. "What the fuck was that?" she gasped. I had no answer. My brain refused to process what I had just seen. Daniel didn't stop, and neither did I. We drove past the spot where the figure had been, both vehicles now moving at a dangerous speed given the poor road conditions and failing light. The forest around us seemed to press closer, branches scraping against the windows like skeletal fingers trying to find a way in. I kept checking the rearview mirror, terrified of seeing that thing following us, but the road behind remained empty, at least as far as I could see in the growing darkness. We had been driving for perhaps 10 minutes when Daniel's Jeep suddenly swerved violently, then veered off the road. I braked hard, watching in horror as the Jeep crashed through the underbrush and came to a stop against a tree. Jessica and I leapt out of the CRV and ran to the Jeep. Daniel was slumped over the wheel, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. Leah was screaming, trying to shake him awake. Something ran in front of us. Leah sobbed as I helped pull Daniel from the driver's seat. It came out of nowhere, like a person, but crawling on all fours. Daniel swerved to avoid it and lost control. I helped lay Daniel on the ground beside the road. He was unconscious, but breathing steadily. The cut on his head looked worse than it probably was. Head wounds always bleed profusely. Jessica, with her nursing background, was already examining him, checking his pupils with the flashlight from her phone. "He's got a concussion, but I think he'll be okay," she said after a moment. "We need to get him to a hospital." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "Michael, we have to get out of here. Now." I nodded and turned to check on the Jeep. One look told me it wasn't going anywhere. The front axle was clearly broken from the impact with the tree. "We'll all have to go in the CRV," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Help me get Daniel into the back seat." Between the three of us, we managed to carry the still unconscious Daniel to my vehicle and lay him across the back seat. Leah climbed in beside him, cradling his head in her lap. Jessica took the passenger seat, and I slid behind the wheel, my hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I put the car in gear and pulled away, leaving Daniel's Jeep behind. The darkness was almost complete now, my headlights carving a narrow tunnel of visibility through the pitch-black forest. We were all silent, straining to hear any sound above the engine's hum that might warn us of danger. The road continued to twist and turn, unfamiliar and seemingly endless. According to my watch, we had been driving for over an hour, far longer than it should have taken to reach the main road. Suddenly, Jessica pointed ahead. "There, lights." Sure enough, there were lights visible through the trees. Not the warm yellow of streetlights or houses, but harsh white floodlights. As we approached, a building came into view, some kind of large structure set back from the road. "It looks like a visitor center or ranger station," Jessica said, hope creeping into her voice. "They'll have a phone, maybe medical supplies for Daniel." I turned onto the side road leading to the building, relief washing over me at the thought of finding help. But as we drew closer, that relief curdled into confusion and then fear. The building wasn't a visitor center or ranger station. It was a large, warehouse-like structure, its concrete walls stark and institutional. The floodlights mounted on tall poles around the perimeter illuminated a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. A large gate stood open, as if inviting us in. "This doesn't look right," Leah whispered from the back seat. I had to agree. There was something deeply wrong about finding this facility out here in the middle of nowhere. Yet we needed help for Daniel, and this was the first sign of civilization we'd encountered. I stopped the car just outside the gate, uncertain. "Should we go in?" I asked, looking to Jessica and Leah for input. Before either could answer, Daniel groaned and stirred in the back seat. "No," he mumbled, his voice thick but urgent. "Not safe. That's where they take them." His eyes fluttered open, unfocused but filled with terror. The missing people. I remember now, stories, experiments. He was clearly disoriented from the concussion, his words slurred and disconnected, but the fear in his voice was unmistakable. As we sat there, frozen with indecision, a figure emerged from the building and began walking toward the gate, a man in what looked like a security uniform. He moved with a strange, stiff gait, and even from this distance, something about him seemed off. Behind him, more figures appeared at the entrance to the building, standing in a group, watching us. Their proportions were wrong, too tall, too thin, moving in ways that seemed almost mechanical. "Go," Jessica whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Michael, turn around. Now." I didn't need to be told twice. I threw the CRV into reverse, backed up quickly, then spun the wheel, executing a hurried three-point turn. As we pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The security guard had reached the gate and was just standing there, watching us leave. The floodlights behind him cast his face in shadow, but I could have sworn I saw a smile, wide and unnatural, spread across his features. We drove in tense silence, the only sound Daniel's occasional groans from the back seat as Leah tried to keep him comfortable. Jessica kept checking behind us, terrified we were being followed. The road seemed to go on forever, turning and twisting through the dense forest with no sign of the highway or any landmark I recognized. According to my watch, it was now past midnight. We had been trying to escape these woods for over 6 hours, which was impossible given the relatively small area we should have been in. "This doesn't make any sense," I muttered, fighting fatigue and rising panic. "We should have hit the main road hours ago." Jessica didn't respond, just stared out the windshield with wide, frightened eyes. In the back seat, Daniel had fallen unconscious again, which worried me. His breathing seemed labored now, and Leah was quietly crying as she stroked his hair. The CRV's gas gauge was dropping into the red zone, another impossibility since we'd filled up before reaching the campsite. Yet the needle continued to fall, and I knew we wouldn't be able to keep driving much longer. Just as I was about to share this new problem with the others, the engine sputtered, coughed, and died. We rolled to a stop in the middle of the road, surrounded by darkness. "No, no, no," I whispered, turning the key repeatedly, but the engine wouldn't catch. I pounded the steering wheel in frustration, then took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "We're out of gas," I explained to Jessica and Leah. "It doesn't make sense, but we're out." Jessica pulled out her phone, the battery now dangerously low. The GPS app still showed no location, and there was still no signal. She let out a broken laugh that sounded close to hysteria. "What do we do now?" Leah asked, her voice small and frightened. I had no good answer. We couldn't stay in the car, not with Daniel needing medical attention, but the thought of venturing out into the dark forest was terrifying. Before I could formulate a plan, Jessica suddenly stiffened beside me. "Listen," she whispered. We all fell silent, straining our ears. At first, I heard nothing. Then it came, a distant sound of engines, growing louder. Headlights appeared around a bend in the road behind us, approaching fast. Relief flooded through me. Other people, help at last. I scrambled out of the car, waving my arms frantically. Jessica followed, but Leah stayed with Daniel. The approaching vehicles, there were 2 of them, large SUVs with spotlights mounted on their roofs, slowed as they neared us. As they drew closer, the spotlights blinded me, and I raised a hand to shield my eyes. The vehicles stopped about 20 yards away, their engines idling. Car doors opened and closed, and I could make out the silhouettes of several people approaching through the glare of the headlights. "Thank God," I called out. "We need help. We have an injured man." The figures continued to approach slowly, saying nothing. As they drew nearer and my eyes adjusted to the light, I could see they were wearing some kind of uniforms, dark clothes with insignias I didn't recognize. Their faces were partially obscured by caps pulled low over their eyes. One of them, apparently the leader, stepped forward. "You folks seem to be lost," he said, his voice oddly flat and emotionless. "We've been looking for you." A chill ran down my spine at his words. How did they know to look for us? We hadn't told anyone exactly where we were going, and we certainly hadn't called for help. There was no cell service. Jessica must have had the same thought because she took a step back, bumping into me. "Michael," she whispered. "Something's wrong." The man tilted his head, the movement somehow inhuman. "We're here to help," he said, but there was no warmth or concern in his voice. "Your friend needs medical attention. We have a facility nearby." With a sickening jolt, I realized he was talking about the building we'd fled from earlier. How could he know about Daniel's condition unless they had been watching us the whole time? "No, thank you," I said firmly, backing up toward our car, pulling Jessica with me. We'll wait for the Rangers or state police. The man's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes, which remained cold and empty. There are no Rangers coming, he said simply. No police either. No one knows you're here. The other figures had spread out, I realized with growing horror, slowly encircling us and our vehicle. Jessica tugged urgently at my arm. Get in the car, she hissed. Now. We turned and ran the few steps back to the CRV. I yanked open the driver's door as Jessica scrambled in on the passenger side. Lock the doors, I shouted to Leah, who was staring out the window in confusion and fear. She reached forward and hit the central locking button, just as one of the uniformed men reached for the rear door handle. Through the windows, I could see them surrounding the car now, their movements coordinated and purposeful. The leader approached my window and tapped on the glass with what looked like a metal baton. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice muffled but still audible. Your friend will die without medical attention, and you're trespassing on private property. This is public forest land. Jessica shouted through the glass. The man's expression didn't change. No, he said simply. It's not. It hasn't been for a very long time. He tapped the window again, harder this time. Last chance to come willingly. In the back seat, Daniel suddenly stirred. The keys, he mumbled, his voice weak but urgent. Try the keys again. It seemed futile, we were out of gas, but I turned the key in the ignition anyway. To my utter astonishment, the engine roared to life, and the gas gauge jumped back to half full. I didn't question this impossibility. I just threw the car into gear and floored the accelerator. The CRV surged forward, forcing the leader to leap out of the way. The headlights illuminated the other figures scrambling to avoid being hit as I swerved around them and accelerated down the road. In the rearview mirror, I could see them running back to their vehicles. They're coming after us, Leah cried, looking out the rear window. Sure enough, headlights appeared behind us, gaining quickly. I pushed the CRV as fast as it would go on the winding forest road, taking curves at dangerous speeds. Jessica braced herself against the dashboard, her face a mask of terror. There, she suddenly shouted, pointing ahead. Lights. Real lights. Through the trees, I could see the unmistakable glow of highway lights. Somehow, impossibly, we had finally found our way back to civilization. The pursuing vehicles were still close behind us as we burst out of the forest road onto the paved highway. I turned sharply onto the main road, tires squealing. To my surprise and relief, there was other traffic. Not much at this late hour, but several cars passed in the opposite direction. I checked the rearview mirror, expecting to see our pursuers emerge from the forest road, but there was nothing, just darkness. The SUVs had vanished. We drove for another 20 minutes until we reached a gas station with an attached convenience store. It was open 24 hours, its fluorescent lights a beacon of normalcy after our nightmare in the woods. I pulled up and we all stumbled out, except for Daniel, who was still drifting in and out of consciousness. The teenage clerk looked alarmed as we burst in, disheveled and clearly traumatized. We need help, Jessica explained breathlessly. My brother has a head injury. Can you call an ambulance? The clerk nodded and reached for the phone behind the counter. As he dialed, I collapsed into a chair, the adrenaline that had kept me going finally draining away, leaving me shaking and exhausted. Leah stayed with Daniel in the car while Jessica explained the situation to the clerk, giving him a sanitized version of events, a camping trip gone wrong, an accident, getting lost in the woods. The ambulance arrived quickly, along with a police car. The paramedics immediately went to work on Daniel, transferring him to a stretcher and loading him into the ambulance. Leo went with him, leaving Jessica and me to talk to the police officer, a middle-aged man named Sergeant Miller who listened patiently to our story, again carefully edited to exclude the inexplicable elements. You folks are lucky, he said when we'd finished. People get lost in those woods all the time. Sometimes they don't make it out. Something in his tone made me look at him more closely. There was knowledge in his eyes, and something else, fear perhaps. Have there been problems out there? I asked carefully. Other incidents. Sergeant Miller looked uncomfortable. There have been some disappearances over the years. Hikers, campers. Most people just avoid that area now. He cleared his throat. Look, you folks should get some rest. There's a motel down the road. Come by the station tomorrow to give your official statements. He handed me his card. Call if you remember anything else unusual. Jessica and I checked into the motel, a rundown place with flickering neon and paper-thin walls, but it felt like luxury after what we'd been through. After showering, we collapsed onto the bed, too exhausted to even speak. I thought I would fall asleep immediately, but instead I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the past 24 hours in my mind. The next morning, we went straight to the hospital. Daniel was conscious and stable, diagnosed with a moderate concussion and some minor cuts and bruises. The doctors wanted to keep him for observation for another day, but he was expected to make a full recovery. Leah had stayed by his side all night and looked even more exhausted than we felt. As we sat around Daniel's hospital bed, none of us mentioned the strange events in the forest. It was as if by unspoken agreement, we had decided not to talk about it, at least not yet. After leaving the hospital, Jessica and I went to the police station as instructed. Sergeant Miller wasn't there, but another officer took our statements. When we mentioned Sergeant Miller's name, a strange look passed over the officer's face. "Miller," he repeated, frowning slightly. "We don't have a Sergeant Miller on the force." Jessica and I exchanged uneasy glances. I described the middle-aged officer who had spoken to us at the gas station, but the officer just shook his head. "Sorry, doesn't ring any bells. Must have been someone from the county sheriff's department." We decided not to press the issue and left the station, both of us unsettled by this new discrepancy. Outside, Jessica grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my flesh. "Michael, I don't like this. First the woods, then the facility, now this Miller person who apparently doesn't exist." Her voice trembled slightly. "What if they're still watching us? What if they followed us here?" I tried to reassure her, but the truth was, I shared her concerns. As we walked back to our motel, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being observed. Every passing car seemed suspicious. Every stranger's glance held hidden meaning. When we reached our room, Jessica immediately pulled the curtains shut and checked that the door was securely locked. We were both jumping at shadows, haunted by what we had experienced. That night, I dreamed about the forest. In my dream, I was wandering alone among the trees, calling out for Jessica. The woods were silent except for a distant, rhythmic tapping sound, like fingernails on glass. I followed the sound, desperate to find its source, and emerged into a clearing. In the center stood a circle of thin, impossibly tall figures, their backs to me. As if sensing my presence, they began to turn, slowly, in unison. I woke up gasping for breath just before I could see their faces. Jessica was already awake, sitting up in bed, staring at her phone. "Daniel's being discharged today," she said without looking up. "We should go pick him up." Her voice was flat, emotionless. I nodded and got up to shower, trying to shake off the lingering dread from my nightmare. As the hot water ran over me, I found myself wondering if we would ever truly escape what had happened in those woods. At the hospital, Daniel was dressed and ready to go, with Leah hovering protectively at his side. He looked better but still pale, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept well either. As we helped him to the car, I noticed he kept glancing over his shoulder, scanning the parking lot as if expecting to see someone or something following us. None of us spoke about it, but I knew we were all feeling the same gnawing fear. We decided to head straight back to Sacramento without stopping in Reno. Nobody wanted to spend any more time in this area than necessary. The drive was tense and mostly silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Daniel occasionally muttered something under his breath, too quiet for me to make out, while Leah kept stroking his arm, murmuring reassurances. Jessica stared out the window, flinching whenever we passed a densely wooded area. About halfway home, Daniel suddenly spoke up from the back seat. "I did some research," he said, his voice stronger than it had been since the accident. "Last night, while you guys were at the motel, I found some stuff online about that area." We all tensed, not really wanting to hear, but unable to ignore him. There have been disappearances going back decades. Hikers, campers, even a forest ranger once. All in the same general region. "Daniel, please," Leah whispered. "Let's not talk about this now." But Daniel shook his head stubbornly. "We need to understand what happened to us," he insisted. "I found mentions of a government facility, some kind of research station established in the 70s. Officially decommissioned in the 90s, but there are rumors it's still operational." He leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. "And get this, Some conspiracy theory forums talk about experiments involving non-human subjects. Jessica turned around sharply. "Stop it," she snapped. "Just stop. We got lost in the woods. You had an accident. We got scared and imagined things. That's all." But her voice lacked conviction, and I could see the fear in her eyes that contradicted her words. Daniel fell silent, slumping back in his seat with a hurt expression. The remainder of the drive passed in uncomfortable silence. When we finally reached Sacramento, I dropped Daniel and Leah at their apartment first. As Daniel got out of the car, he leaned back and to whisper to me, "They're still watching us, you know? I can feel it." Before I could respond, Leah pulled him away, shooting me an apologetic look as she guided him toward their building. I watched them go, a chill running down my spine at Daniel's words. Back at our apartment, Jessica and I went through the motions of returning to normal life. We unpacked, did laundry, ordered takeout. Neither of us mentioned what had happened, as if by tacit agreement we had decided to pretend everything was fine. But that night, as we lay in bed, Jessica suddenly turned to me. "I keep seeing their faces," she whispered, her voice small in the darkness. "Those people at the facility. Something was wrong with them, Michael. They weren't, right?" I pulled her close, feeling her body tremble against mine. "It's over," I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. "We're safe now." But even as I spoke the words, I found myself listening for strange sounds outside our window, imagining shapes moving in the shadows of our bedroom. The fear had followed us home. The next morning, Jessica called in sick to work. She claimed it was just fatigue from the trip, but I knew better. She spent the day inside, curtains drawn, jumping at every noise. I tried to convince her to see a therapist, but she refused. "They wouldn't believe me," she said flatly. "They'd think I was crazy." I couldn't argue with that. I wasn't sure I believed everything myself anymore. Maybe we had hallucinated some of it, our minds playing tricks in the stress of the situation. 3 days after our return, Daniel showed up at our door unannounced. He looked terrible, unshaven, hair unwashed, eyes bloodshot and wild. "Leah's gone," he blurted out as soon as I opened the door. "She went to the store yesterday afternoon and never came back." My stomach dropped. Jessica appeared behind me, her face paling as she heard his words. "Have you called the police?" she asked, pulling her brother inside and closing the door firmly. Daniel nodded frantically. "They took a report, but they don't seem concerned. Said adults go missing all the time, usually show up in a day or two." He ran his hands through his hair, leaving it standing on end. "But I know what happened. They took her. Because of what we saw." Jessica and I exchanged worried glances. Daniel's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, and I wasn't sure if it was a result of the concussion, PTSD from our experience, or something else entirely. "Daniel, you need rest," Jessica said gently, guiding him to the couch. "I'm sure Leah will turn up. Maybe she just needed some space." It was a traumatic experience for all of us. But Daniel shook his head violently. "You don't understand," he insisted. "I've been receiving messages. On my phone, in my email. Random strings of numbers and letters. But there's a pattern. I'm close to figuring it out." He pulled out his phone, showing us a screen full of what looked like gibberish to me. I tried to reason with him, suggesting that perhaps he should see a doctor about potential complications from his concussion, but he grew angry and defensive. "I'm not imagining things," he shouted, jumping to his feet. "They're real, and they're coming for all of us, one by one." Jessica managed to calm him down enough to agree to stay the night on our couch, afraid to let him go home alone in his current state. That night, I was awakened by a noise from the living room. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Jessica, and went to check on Daniel. The couch was empty, a blanket crumpled on the floor. I found him in the kitchen, sitting in the dark, staring out the window. "They're out there," he whispered without turning around. "Watching, waiting." I looked out but saw nothing unusual, just the quiet street, a few parked cars, a streetlight flickering at the corner. "Come back to bed, Daniel," I said softly, trying to hide my growing concern for his mental state. "You need to sleep." He turned to look at me then, and in the dim light filtering in from the street, his face looked gaunt and hollow, his eyes sunk in pools of darkness. "I can't sleep," he said, his voice flat. "When I sleep, I see their faces. And they're not human, Michael. They're not human at all." The next morning, Daniel was gone. He left a note saying he was going to look for Leah, that he had figured out where they might have taken her. Jessica was frantic, calling his cell phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. We debated calling the police, but weren't sure what to tell them. That our traumatized brother had gone looking for his missing girlfriend, whom he believed had been abducted by mysterious non-human entities operating out of a secret government facility. They would think we were all insane. 2 days passed with no word from Daniel. Jessica was beside herself with worry, barely eating or sleeping. I tried to hold things together, going to work during the day, pretending everything was normal, but inside I was unraveling. At night, I kept hearing that tapping sound on our bedroom window, the same rhythmic pattern I had heard on the car that night in the woods. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. I never saw anything when I looked, but the sound continued, night after night. On the 3rd day after Daniel's disappearance, Jessica received a text from his phone. Found her. Don't trust anyone. Coming home. Our relief was palpable, but short-lived. Hours passed, then a day, with no further word and no sign of Daniel or Leah. Jessica wanted to drive back to Reno to search for them, but I managed to convince her that would be too dangerous. Instead, we reported Daniel missing to the police, who connected it to Leah's disappearance but seemed frustratingly unconcerned. A week after Daniel vanished, I came home from work to find an envelope had been slipped under our apartment door. No postmark, no address, just a plain white envelope. Inside was a single photograph, a forest clearing with a small lake that I recognized with a jolt of terror as our campsite. But what made my blood run cold was what the photo showed at the edge of the lake. For crosses made of rough branches lashed together, each bearing a crude nameplate. Even from the grainy image, I could make out our names: Michael, Jessica, Daniel, Leah. I hid the photo before Jessica could see it, not wanting to add to her distress. But that night, as she finally fell into an exhausted sleep beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The image of those 4 crosses burned into my mind. Whatever had happened in those woods, whatever had taken Daniel and Leah, it wasn't finished with us. And deep down, I knew it never would be. The next morning, I woke to find Jessica's side of the bed empty. I called out for her, panic rising in my throat when there was no answer. I searched the apartment, finding no sign of her, no note, nothing. Her car keys and purse were still on the counter where she had left them the night before. I ran outside, looking up and down the street, calling her name. A neighbor poked his head out, annoyed by the commotion, but hadn't seen her. I called the police, who took a report but, once again, didn't seem particularly concerned about yet another missing adult. They asked if she had been under stress lately, if we had argued, if she had any reason to leave voluntarily. Their questions implied they thought she had simply walked out on me, perhaps to join Daniel and Leah wherever they had gone. I wanted to scream at them, to make them understand the horror of what was happening, but I knew how it would sound. That night, alone in our apartment, I heard the tapping again. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. This time, I didn't just hear it. I felt compelled to answer it. I walked to the window as if in a trance and responded with the same pattern. Tap, tap, tap. The street outside was empty, but as I watched, a figure stepped out from behind a parked car. Even from this distance, in the dim glow of the streetlight, I recognized the tall, unnaturally thin silhouette. They had come for me, just as they had come for the others. And in that moment, I realized I had a choice. I could wait here for them to take me, or I could go to them, on my terms, and maybe, just maybe, find Jessica, Daniel, and Leah. Without stopping to think further, I grabbed my keys and rushed outside. The figure was gone, but I knew where to go. Back to the woods, back to that clearing by the lake where it all began. I'm writing this now from a motel room just outside of Reno. Tomorrow, I'll drive into those woods again, following the same roads we took that weekend. I don't expect to come back, but if somehow you're reading this, if someone finds this account of what happened to us, please know that we didn't just disappear. We were taken. And whatever is out there in those woods, whatever operates out of that facility, it isn't human. It just wears human faces, like masks that don't quite fit. Don't go looking for us. Don't try to investigate. Just stay away from those woods near Reno. Because if you go there, if you spend a night by that quiet lake surrounded by silent trees, they'll find you too. And when they do, they'll tap on your window in the dark. Tap, tap, tap. And despite your terror, you'll feel compelled to answer. Tap, 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 and then they'll come for you, just as they came for us, one by one, until there's no one left to remember you were ever there at all. I'm Nora Faye Sullivan, 26 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. It's a cool spot, rainy, green, full of quirky folks and coffee shops I'm way too addicted to. But me and my pals, Caleb Jude Marshall and Lila Grace Perry, needed a change of pace. Caleb's 28, a wiry guy with a quick grin and a knack for fixing anything. Lila's 25, all sass and spark, the kind of person who lights up a room without trying. We've been a trio since our bar-hopping days downtown, always chasing the next adventure. This time, we settled on car camping, roughing it in our own rides. No tents, just the open road. I've got my Subaru Forester, a little scratched but tough as nails, perfect for crashing in the back. Caleb's driving his Chevy Blazer, an old beast he's patched up a dozen times. And Lila's got her Nissan Rogue, sleek and packed with her random gear. Reno, Nevada, sounded like a solid pick, a few hours south, far enough to ditch the Portland drizzle for some desert air. We roll out of Portland mid-morning, a Friday in early October, the sky gray but dry. I'm leading the way, playlist bumping, with Caleb's Blazer behind me and Lila's Rogue trailing. The drive's easy. I-5 to I-80, cutting through mountains and scrubland, trading stories over our phones about dumb stuff, like Caleb's epic wipeout on a skateboard last summer. We're buzzing, ready for a weekend of nothing but us and the wild. Reno hits us with that gritty charm as dusk settles. Casinos flashing, but we're not here for that. We head east, aiming for the Lockwood area, a quiet stretch near the Truckee River that Lila swore was perfect for camping. The road turns to dirt, my Forester jostling along, and we pull into a riverside spot, flat, open, with the water gurgling nearby and sagebrush dotting the edges. I cut the engine, hop out, and breathe in that crisp, dry air. Lila's out of her Rogue fast, stretching with a dramatic groan, her blonde hair catching the last light. Caleb climbs from his Blazer, toolbox clanking as he tosses it aside, grinning like a kid. We park in a loose circle, tailgates facing in, our little fortress. I pop my hatch, toss in a sleeping pad, and figure it's home for the night. Lila's rearranging her Nissan, muttering about needing more snacks, while Caleb kicks back against his Chevy. The sun's gone, sky darkening quick, and we're rigging a small fire with driftwood from the riverbank. Lila's got marshmallows, she's obsessed, and we're roasting him, laughing as Caleb burns his into a charred mess. I'm leaning on my Forester, the firelight flickering, and it's perfect, river rushing soft, stars popping out, that free feeling washing over me. We're miles from anyone, just us and this quiet slice of nowhere. Night falls hard, the chill creeping in, and Lila's joking about how we'll hear coyotes howling soon. I crawl into my Forester, zip into my sleeping bag, and crack the window. Love that fresh breeze. Caleb's sprawled in his Blazer, door ajar like always, and Lila's locked tight in her Rogue, probably texting herself reminders. The fire's down to embers, the river's a steady hum, and I'm drifting, totally at peace. Sleep's pulling me under when I catch it. Sharp, quick, like a snap in the dark. My eyes pop open, and I'm straining to hear it again, telling myself it's just a twig or the wind. But it's too still out there, too quiet now, and my skin's prickling, like something's watching us from the shadows. I'm wide awake in my Forester, that snap still echoing in my head, my sleeping bag tangled around me. It's dark as hell, the kind of dark that swallows everything, and I'm squinting out the window, trying to see past the glass. My phone says 1:19 a.m., no bars, big shocker out here. The river's still rushing, but it's fainter now, like something's dampening the sound, and I'm sitting up, heart thumping a little too fast. I grab my flashlight, flick it on, and shine it through the windshield. Nothing but our cars and the dying fire, embers glowing weak. Caleb's Blazer is quiet, door's still cracked, and Lila's Rogue looks locked up tight. I'm about to settle back when it hits me. This faint, bitter smell, like vinegar or something sour, drifting in through the window. It's weird, out of place, and I'm wrinkling my nose, wondering what's up. Then Lila's tapping on her window, soft but urgent, and I see her silhouette sitting up in her Rogue. I roll mine down a bit, whisper, "You okay?" She's got her phone's light on, face pale, and says, "Nora, you smell that?" And I heard something, like a click. I nod, 'cause yeah, that snap's got me edgy too, and now this smell's making it worse. "Wait, Caleb," I tell her, sliding out of my car, boots crunching on the dirt. Caleb's stirring when I tap his blazer's door, groaning. "What now?" He sits up, rubbing his face, and I fill him in. Snap, smell, Lila's click. He sniffs the air, frowns, and mutters, "That's nasty. Maybe a skunk, but it ain't right. Too sharp, too chemical." He climbs out, grabbing a flashlight, and we're all standing there, beams sweeping the riverbank and sagebrush, the night pressing in tight. The smell stronger now, stinging my eyes a little, and Lila's fidgeting, saying, "This feels off, guys. We should check it out." Caleb's skeptical, scratching his head, but I'm with her. Better to know than sit here guessing. "Just a quick look," I say, grabbing a stick from the fire pit. Dumb weapon, but it's something. Caleb sighs, pulls a wrench from his toolbox, and Lila's got her keys gripped like claws. We're edging toward the river, flashlights bouncing, the ground soft underfoot. That sour smells thick here, almost gagging me, and I'm scanning the water, black and glassy, reflecting our lights. Caleb's muttering about how we're overreacting, but then it comes again. A sharp click-click, like metal on metal, off to our right. My beam swings over, catches nothing but bushes, and I'm whispering, "You hear that?" Lila's nodding, eyes huge, and Caleb's gone quiet, wrench raised. We're creeping closer, the river on our left, when I see it. Something glinting in the dirt, small and shiny. I kneel, shine my light, and it's a piece of metal, jagged, like it broke off something. "What the?" I start, but then the ground vibrates, faint, quick, like a tremor. Lila grabs my arm, hissing, "Nora, that's not normal." I'm standing now, stick tight in my hand, and that clicking's back, louder, faster, coming from the brush ahead. My light's shaking as I sweep it over, and there's movement, low, quick, darting between the sage. Caleb's swearing under his breath, Lila's backing up, and I'm frozen, that sour smell choking me. Whatever's out there, it's close, and it's not some animal. It's wrong, scary wrong. We're turning, ready to bolt, when that vibration hits again, stronger, rattling my teeth. The clicking stops, dead quiet, and I'm thinking, this is bad, this is so bad. My flashlight catches something, just a flicker, long, thin, moving fast in the dark, and I'm yelling, "Back to the cars now." We're stumbling, panic rising, and I know we've stumbled into something we shouldn't have. I'm tripping over my own feet, scrambling back to the cars, that sour smell burning my throat. Lila's right beside me, her keys jabbing into her palm, and Caleb's a step behind, wrench swinging wild. My flashlight's bouncing, light slashing across the dirt, and that clicking's back, sharp, rapid, closing in fast. The ground shakes again, a low rumble that knocks me off balance, and I'm yelling, "Move, move," like it'll make us faster. We're almost to the clearing when it bursts out of the sage, tall, spindly, all wrong. It's like a skeleton stretched too thin, bones gleaming wet under the flashlight. But they ain't bones. They're slick, black, dripping with something dark and shiny. Its head's a mess, no face, just a gaping hole where that clicking's pouring out, loud and shrill. My stomach flips. This ain't natural, it's pure horror, and it's coming right for us. Lila screams, high and sharp, and I'm shoving her toward her rogue, my stick useless in my hand. Caleb's swinging his wrench, shouting, "Stay back," but it don't even flinch, lunges at him, those long, dripping arms slashing. He ducks, barely, and I'm grabbing at him, pulling him toward my Forester. The thing's fast, too fast, skidding across the dirt, that black ooze splattering everywhere, stinking like acid. My car's close, and I'm yelling, "Get in." Lila's already at her rogue, fumbling her door open, and I'm shoving Caleb toward my passenger side. That thing's on us now, slams into my Forester's hood, metal crunching, and I feel the jolt in my bones. Its arm whips out, smashes my windshield, glass cracking loud, and I'm diving into the driver's seat, heart pounding so hard I can't think straight. Caleb's in, slamming his door, and I'm jamming the key in, hands shaking. The engine sputters. Come on, don't fail me now. And that thing's clawing at the hood, peeling it back like tinfoil. Black ooze drips through the cracks, hissing as it hits the engine, and that smell's choking me, eyes watering. Lila's Rogue roars to life, headlights blinding, and she's yelling, "Nora, go!" through her window. It turns, thank God, lunges at her car instead, smashing into her driver's side. She swerves, tires spinning, and I'm flooring it, my Forester lurching forward. The thing's arm catches my bumper, yanks hard, and I'm fishtailing, gravel flying. Caleb's shouting, "Hit it again," and I ram it, hard. Feel the crunch, see it stagger, but it's back up, clicking like a broken machine, chasing us. We're peeling out of the clearing, Lilo ahead, my headlights bouncing off her Rogue. That thing's behind us, skittering fast, Ooze trailing like a sick shadow. My windshield's a mess, half gone, and the wind's screaming in, cold and sharp. Caleb's gripping the dash, muttering, "What is that thing?" "I don't know, man. It's scary, it's disturbing, and it's not stopping." The river's on our left, road twisting tight, and it's leaping now, jumps right over my car, lands in front of Lila. She brakes hard, skids, and it slams her hood, glass shattering. I'm swerving to miss her, yelling her name, and it's on her car, tearing in, metal screeches, and I see her fighting, swinging something at it. My chest's tight. This is bad, so bad, and I'm slamming the gas, trying to ram it off her. It twists, catches my fender with one dripping arm, and I'm spinning, tires slipping. Lila's screaming, Caleb's yelling at me to stop, but I can't. It's got her pinned, and I'm watching, helpless, as that black ooze pours over her car. Something's seriously wrong here, and we're in way over our heads. My Forester's skidding, tires screaming on the dirt. That black dripping freak latched onto Lila's Rogue ahead. I'm slamming the gas, aiming to ram it off her, my busted windshield letting in a blast of cold air. Caleb's yelling, "Nora, watch it," but I'm locked in. Lila's trapped, her screams cutting through the night, and that thing's tearing into her car like it's paper. My fender clips it, hard, and it staggers, ooze splattering, but it's still gripping her hood. Lila's fighting. I see her through the shattered glass, swinging a flashlight at it, but it's useless. That clicking's deafening now, rattling my skull, and it slashes down. Her scream cuts off, sharp and wet, and I'm yelling her name, voice breaking. My car's lurching, engine coughing from the damage, and Caleb's grabbing my arm, shouting, "She's gone, we gotta go." I don't want to believe it, but blood's streaking her windshield, and she's not moving. I'm flooring it, tears blurring my eyes, swerving around her Rogue. That thing's still on her, ripping in, and I catch a glimpse. Her slumped over, gone, and my chest caves in. The road's a blur, river flashing by on the left, and it's after us now, leaping off her car, skittering fast. My rear view's full of it, long, slick limbs, that faceless hole gaping, and it's gaining, ooze trailing like a sick comet. Caleb's twisting in his seat, yelling, "Faster, Nora," but my Forester's maxed out, shaking hard. The thing jumps, lands on my roof, metal buckling, and I swerve, fishtailing bad. Its arm punches through, right above me, dripping that black stuff. Hisses as it hits my shoulder, burning like acid. I'm screaming, jerking the wheel, and it slides off, crashing into the dirt beside us. We're flying now, road twisting toward Lockwood, the river narrowing on our left. My shoulder's on fire, skin blistering, and Caleb's digging in the glove box, pulling out a rag to press on it. "Hang on, we're almost out," he says, voice shaky. That thing's back up, chasing, and it's relentless. Leaps again, clips my tailgate, and I feel the jolt, my car wobbling. I'm weaving, dodging it, praying we hit pavement soon. The dirt turns to gravel, then asphalt. Thank God. And I'm pushing 70, houses flickering in the distance. It's still coming, skittering across the road, but it's slowing, like the hard ground's throwing it off. My headlights catch a sign, Lockwood, half a mile, and I'm gunning for it, Caleb shouting directions. "Left, take the left." I crank the wheel, tires squealing, and we're on a side street, lights popping up around us. It's falling back. Those red taillights ahead are just cars now, normal people, and I'm shaking, sweat soaking my shirt. The clicking's fading, that sour smell thinning out, and I'm weaving through quiet streets, my Forester rattling like it's gonna die. Caleb's breathing hard, rag still on my shoulder, and I'm choking out, "Lila, we lost her." He don't say nothing, just nods, face tight. We pull into a gas station, neon buzzing overhead, and I kill the engine, hands trembling. My car's a wreck, hood peeled, windshield gone, tailgate smashed, and I'm staring at it, Lila's blood flashing in my head. That thing's out there, maybe still hunting, and we're alive by dumb luck. I'm kicking myself. We should have stayed put, never gone near the river, and now she's dead 'cause we didn't. I'm slumped against my Forester in the gas station lot, engine ticking as it cools, the neon sign buzzing overhead. My shoulders throbbing, blistered raw where that black ooze hit me, and Caleb's pacing, rag still clutched in his hand, blood smudged on his fingers. Lockwood's quiet around us, streetlights humming, a car rolling by slow, but my head screaming, Lila's crumpled form burned into my eyes. I'm shaking, trying to breathe, that sour smell still clinging to my clothes like a curse. Caleb stops, leans on his blazer's hood. We towed it out of there in the chaos, and mutters, "We gotta call someone, Nora." I nod, fumbling my phone out of my pocket. Finally got bars here, and I'm dialing 911, voice cracking as I spill it. Camping gone wrong, friend attacked, monster thing by the river. The operator's calm, too calm, saying help's coming, but I'm picturing them laughing later. Nobody's gonna believe this. My car's trashed, hood bent, windshield a gaping hole, tailgate hanging off, and I'm kicking the tire, mad at myself. We shouldn't have gone out there, Caleb. That click, that smell, I knew it was off. He's quiet, just nods, and I'm replaying it. Us by the river, poking around like idiots, leading that thing right to us. Lila's gone 'cause I didn't say no, didn't trust my gut when it screamed to stay put. Sirens wail in the distance, red and blue flashing closer, and I'm wiping my face, tears mixing with dirt. Cops pull up, two of them, stepping out slow, eyeing our wrecked cars. I'm talking fast, words tumbling. River, black dripping thing, Lila dead, and they're glancing at each other, one jotting notes, the other shining a light on my shoulder. "You're hurt," he says, like I don't know, and I'm snapping. "Yeah, it burned me, that thing did." They're skeptical, can see it in their faces, but they radio for backup, something about checking the site. Caleb's telling him about the ooze, the clicking, and I'm thinking, good luck finding it. That stuff was slick, alive almost, and I'm betting it slunk back into the dark by now. My phone's buzzing, missed calls from Lila's mom, probably worried, and I can't answer, can't face that yet. Ambulance rolls in, medics swarming me, wrapping my shoulder, asking questions I barely hear. Caleb's getting checked too, his hands shaky, and I'm staring at my Forester, that black smear still on the tailgate. Proof it was real. Cops are talking about a search, but I'm hollow. Lila's out there, torn up, and we ran. I'm kicking myself harder now, should have fought more, dragged her out of that car, anything. They're loading me into the ambulance, Caleb climbing in after, and I'm muttering, "It's my fault, man." He shakes his head, says, "We didn't know," but it don't help. The doors slam, sirens kick on, and we're rolling, Reno's glow fading behind us. That thing's still out there. I feel it, and I'm left with this wreck of a night, a friend gone, and a guilt that's gonna haunt me forever.